Father God, thank you for the day. Thank you for the opportunity to come together and make decisions for our county. Help us to make the best decisions and keep the peace. Bless America, bless our troops, bless our first responders, bless Michigan, and bless beautiful Cass County. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Leyland.
Present.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Present.
Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Howie.
Present.
Commissioner Barrera.
Present.
Commissioner Marquetti.
Here.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
All right, next item is public comment, limited to 3 minutes per person. Please address the board. Nobody in the audience. First person may go. Going once, going twice.
Oh, public
We
comment?
didn't hear you.
Yeah, it's public comment.
I get to talk again, yay!
6 minutes today.
Okay. I guess I want to bring up MDARD, the Rural Readiness Grant Housing Study. I don't go along with this as being a farmer of owning 500 acres. I know where this is going. I have done a lot of research, as you heard last time about the Agenda 21, about the name is being changed all the time because people are catching on to what exactly Agenda 21 is. So then it's Agenda 21, so then it's like, oh yeah, well, people's finding out, well, then it's Agenda 2030. So then it's like, okay, well, we're going to change the name again. So then the name is changed to Walk Around Cities, 15-minute cities, now it's circular cities. What they want to do is they want to come out to the farm ground, and, we've lived on the farm, I've lived on the farm now, where we live at for 44 years. In our rural area, we don't need any type of housing out there. We raise corn. We raised corn for Pioneer. This last year, we raised green beans for the cannery. We raised peas that went to Gerber's. And so, we're just not feeding livestock. And so what I'm saying is the housing study. Everything I'm reading is about the tiny little houses. Well, of course, they say, oh, well, they're not really tiny. Well, when you've got like a 200, 500 square foot house, that's tiny. And when you have them one next to another after another, I didn't know what it was until I seen some, I believe they're in Florida. I seen them on the internet this last week. And they're right next to each other. And they're taking up this farm ground. Have you guys not realized how much farm ground has been taken away because of building, because of businesses? Ed Lowe's, over there where MEC is at, that was farm ground once upon a time. Look at it now. You've got your big MEC building in there. You've got your other, well, I guess it looks like it's hydro, but it's Yedro. That's going in there. They're going to have more stuff in there. And sure, that's nice. But it's taking away the farm ground. This has to be stopped. If this wants to be done on a city block, if you've got houses that are kind of raggedy, go in and redo those houses. Bring Habitat for Humanity in to get some of these houses for these people. You know, these housing studies. Why do we need housing studies? Do we have homeless? If we have homeless, I don't see them. I'm in Casablanca almost every day. I don't see any homeless. So, I mean, these housing studies, I don't understand why housing studies have to be done. But what I'm saying is, they're coming after the farm ground.
Scary.
Hi, Lisa Smith, Edwardsburg. They are coming after the farmland. 125 acres right next to where I live, out in a rural community, is being deemed for industrial. Straight from prime farmland going to industrial. 125 acres. That is going to change the entire village. Not to mention, with what Market Park wants to bring in 200 units. This is our rural community. Rural. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Karen Tan, Porter Township. I'm opposed to this for multiple reasons, but also citizens have the right to their privacy. And so we have no business surveying their land without, you know, that violates their privacy rights. So I'm opposed to this.
Thank you.
Wendy Glosser, once again, City of Dowagiac. I spoke on this before, the same topic, and I have questions about the survey because at first I thought it was like really literally a physical survey of the land in the county, you know, to put housing projects in. Then I'm hearing, then I kind of got a waft, if you will, that they're looking at doing like market analysis, you know, so I have a question for clarity's sake, and whenever it can answer be entered, maybe not now, but later at some point. If it's a physical survey of all of the land in the county to find out what's buildable, what's whatever, then that is a violation of, because the majority of the land is private property owned by people or businesses and both. And they don't need to be surveying my house or the city of Dowagiac or whatever, or anyone's land. So that part, when you think about that, and why do we have to pay for a survey of that? Why do we need a third party, whatever that, you know, that whole thing, I just think there's some more questions that need to be asked and answered on this, on the details of it. And we do have the right to our privacy, and the county, it's not up to the county to hire somebody to come and survey everybody else's property. They want to survey the county-owned property, that's fine, they can do that, you guys have that power, but not for the rest of us. Thanks.
Next.
Rose Kilsheimer. I live across from a farm field, and he grows for Green Giant. And I'm terrified of what my property values will dip down to if we have tiny homes that are built across the street from me. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but who are we attracting to live in these tiny homes? So I'm very concerned about this and the farmland, because they take all our farmland and develop it. That's our food source. And as I was watching the news the other day, the city of Chicago, they are implementing government-run grocery stores. Is that where we're headed? Read about it.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Number 6, any additions or deletions to the agenda? All good? All right, number 7, approval of the agenda, Commissioner Marquetti.
Yes, I move for the approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a motion with support, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, do the same. Motion carries. Number 8, Commissioner Barrera.
I move that we approve the August 17, 2023 Committee of the Whole minutes.
Second.
There's a motion with support. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, do the same. Motion carries. Number 9, presentations. A is materials management. Marcy Hamilton. Go ahead.
All right, thank you for having me today. I'm with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. We're the regional planning agency for Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren counties. And as soon as it's a presentation up here, I want to talk to you about a new, some new legislation that has passed the state that is now requiring counties across the state of Michigan to have a materials management plan. So we can go ahead and go to the, oh, I can do that, never mind. Where do I point this at? Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh. I'll put it up here or
Back here.
back there?
It should be, is it off?
That would probably be key, thank you. All right. So, just a real quick background. When I started working at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission back in 1998, I was hired to write the Cass County Solid Waste Management Plan. And that was a requirement back then by the state, all the counties, and I served on the committees for Van Buren and Berrien County. And we've had those solid waste management plans in effect for a while. You've had a solid waste management planning committee, which some of you probably served on. And then earlier this year, the state passed a new law that says we're going to switch from a solid waste management plan to a materials management plan. So it's going to be a little bit more comprehensive. And it's going to address recycling more and composting and trying to divert useful things out of the landfill as much as possible. And so reasons why to do this, again, protecting public health and the environment is one of those. One of the things, keeping hazardous materials out of landfill so it doesn't leach into our groundwater. We want to make sure those are disposed of properly. It also benefits economies and the communities in Michigan because there could be job creation from some of these activities. The goals at the state level is to have a 45% recycling rate by 2029. So obviously, you know, we're going to need infrastructure to support those goals in the future and move us towards those. So back in 1998, there was more focus on how we manage our solid waste and recycling, and over time, that's kind of gone away in a lot of counties in Michigan. And so the idea is to bring, what the good news is, it's not an unfunded mandate. The state is putting money behind this to help us do this. So that's the good news, because so many other things come down and you have to do them and there's no funding attached to it. So this is a little different. So that's the good news. So what the state is saying is that every county needs to have a materials management plan. This slide just goes through all of the things that are going to be required in that plan. So like I said, it's a little bit more comprehensive than the solid waste management plan that you have now and have been operating under for many years. So I won't read through all that. I don't know if you guys have this in your packets, but the presentation can be available. But basically it's, just taking us, look at all the solid waste management facilities in your area. It focuses also on education and outreach about recycling and composting, and also citing new facilities if needed. Responsibilities as we move forward with this. The county board, will be the county approval agency for this plan. So your job is to designate a planning agency to write the materials management plan, and then appoint a materials management planning committee that will meet and help develop this plan for the county. And so, and then ultimately, the plan is approved by this body, okay? So basically what, first of all, I'll go through this Materials Management Planning Committee. These are the types of folks that would sit on these committees, any people who operate any kind of solid waste disposal facilities or as a material hauler or waste hauler, anybody who's a recovery facilitator or composter, environmental interest group. There's also the Regional Planning Agency, which is us, and we'd also have, if we do a multi-county approach, you'd also have government officials and somebody from the board that would sit on this committee too. So it's kind of a diverse, trying to bring people together that would, again, they would just be advisory to the designated planning agency, would write the plan, and then again, approved by you guys. So, like I said, the good news is the state is giving money to the counties to do this effort. You'll get $60,000 per county. But the key here too is if you decide to work together with your neighboring communities, you'll get another $10,000 on top of that, and also 50 cents per capita on top of that $60,000 per county if you work together. So we've already done, so like I said, our agency serves Van Buren, Berrien, and Cass. We've already been up to Van Buren and gave the same presentation to them. I was out of the blue, I wasn't expecting it, but right at that meeting, made a motion that they wanted to designate us the planning agency, the designated planning agency, to write the plan. And they, in their motion, they also said they wanted to pursue working with Berrien and Cass counties. We went to Berrien County a couple weeks ago, gave the same presentation to them. They weren't so quick to jump on making the motion, but the sentiment was that they felt, Berrien County felt that they did not have the capacity within their own staff to write the plan, and they were looking at, they saw the benefits of designating us as the planning agency and working collaboratively with you in Van Buren County. So, so that's where we are, and we wanted to, lay that on the table for you guys to consider too. If you want to work together with the neighbors and share in those costs, there's obviously efficiencies of doing that. Berrien County has landfills, you don't. So there's different facilities that, we can work in. If we do a regional plan, we can say, well, Cass County doesn't need a landfill because we're working with Berrien County and they have landfills. And so there's those benefits of working together. Also, just more efficiency in writing the plan, and the costs associated with that would be less overall. And we'd make sure that, each county was represented on that committee and had input. And again, even though it's this joint plan that covers the three counties, it wouldn't go anywhere without your approval. You still would need to approve it. Each county would need to approve it, or make changes until you're happy with it. So, so what's the process is supposed to be next week. The Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy is supposed to issue the initiation of this process. And once they do that, there's 180 days that this board and all the county boards have to file what's called a notice of intent. And that would lay out, who is your designated planning agency and who's going to be on your committee, and then if you're going to work together. And so, so we're trying to get ahead of that and educate all the boards and start the discussion early, because it sounds like a long time, but as you know, that time goes very quickly. So we want to make sure that we don't fall behind and don't jeopardize getting the money that's coming down from the state to do this. Then after that happens, the designated planning agency would work on a program and a plan of writing the plan and figure out all that and get that approved by each county board. And then we would get into actually writing the plan for the three counties if you choose to do the three-county option. So that's the process. So like I said, we've been to the 2 other counties. They are very interested in working with you if you're interested in that. If we were to move that way, we would help you guys with that NOI process and working out agreements between the counties of how it would all take place. So it'd be a very collaborative and transparent process to do that between the 3 counties if we want to do that. So that's pretty much what I had to present, and I don't know if you have any questions or thoughts or, yeah,
You
man.
may have touched on this early on, but this takes the place of like solid waste planning committee, so essentially that committee would be dissolved upon
Right.
implementation of this.
Right.
And with, I mean, I understand the timing of when to get kind of the plans. When do we expect like it would be initiated? Would that be like, are we looking at like 24 as a
Yeah.
timing, something like, I guess I'm kind of curious when we're looking at that.
Yeah, we'd probably start writing the plan in '24, and I could see it taking almost a year to do that, to assess everything and make sure, we're meeting all the needs of the 3 counties. And so I could, see it being done in early '25,
Okay, that's what I figured.
yeah.
'Cause I'm on that board, and that'd be great if you did it.
That's kind of the feeling we got from the other 2 counties too.
So this would be creating one board for the 3 counties to sit on,
Yes.
instead of each county having their own board?
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
I think, the one thing that we run into a lot, and, I think Jeremiah, you could speak on this too, but with the solid waste planning committee, I mean, getting those like, the solid waste generators and, all those specific positions, like, it's hard to find in each county, like, people that fit those. And then
Right.
even if you have 1 or 2, getting somebody to say, yep, I want to serve on a board that's going to meet once a month.
For free.
That's really, that's really difficult to.
yeah. Yeah, and that is a big advantage of working together. We can pull from the 3 counties to make up this, but again, making sure we do have representation from, elected officials from all the 3 counties, so, yeah.
Anybody else have anything?
I don't know if we have this in our packet. Are we able to get this slide deck?
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
ask
I
that.
have it, I can send it up to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and then, I have a question. Okay, Marcy, now, how soon do you need to know? Because we're gonna have to talk about it, and then we will have to vote on it. So how soon do you need to know if we're gonna, has Varian said they're on board yet?
They haven't officially, when
Okay.
we presented to them,
Okay,
they were all, Dan Fetty, who's our community development
Yes.
director, was trying to say, this is the way we should go, because we
Yeah.
don't have the capacity to do this. And the board seemed, they didn't vote on it, but they seemed to agree with
Okay.
him. And so I have a feeling they'll probably act on it. If not, they meet every week.
Okay.
So they'll probably act on it within the next couple weeks.
Okay.
And
Okay.
do what Van Buren has done and make a motion to do that. So I know you guys don't meet every week like that, most counties don't. But yeah, if we could,
Okay.
in the next month or so, in the next
Okay.
1 or 2 meetings. That way, the other counties know, and we can start working on that NOI and getting the agreements done and making sure that we have enough time to do a good job in making those agreements and appointing that committee.
okay, so I have another, that letter of intent, we would be the ones who would send the letter of intent to say that we were joining with Van Buren and Varian? Okay.
Yeah, and so if you're wanting to go with us as the designated planning agency, I would, draft those for you guys and
Okay.
along with you
Okay.
guys. And even if you all 3 are working together, you each will send that notice of intent to the state. And,
Okay.
and they'll go, and they'll see Cass, and they'll say, oh, they want to work with Van Buren and Varian, and they'll check
Okay.
Van Buren's, and they'll check Varian's, and like, okay, and
Okay.
they'll, so they have to do that for all 83 counties.
All right, thank you.
I have a question for our board. If I asked her to see what the other counties were doing in the meantime while we were waiting for our decision, would you all want her to send me and Leyland to be the chair and vice chair point of contact for what the other counties are doing, or would you want her to email all of us? Email me and then I disseminate it down, or email all of us so we're all aware at the same time?
Yeah, that's fine.
I would like to have the
Could you do that for us if,
Yeah.
like, what the other counties are doing? That way, because we're neighbors and we're trying to partner with them perhaps, it'd be nice to know what they're doing also, so we can make more educated decisions.
Yeah. What I can do is I can send you the minutes from the Van Buren County meeting where they passed that motion. And then, once Berrien County, if they do the same, then I can forward those minutes on to you
Just let
guys
us know,
too.
yeah.
So you'll know. I'll keep you
Thanks.
updated.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So do you want me to send it to you and you distribute it?
No,
or do you want me to send it to all of
Yeah,
them?
or, well, you
Or to
can
Matt.
send it to Matt, and then Matt will give it to all of us. That
Okay.
way you can stay out of it, just one person.
Okay.
One name to remember.
Perfect. I can do that. I got his number and email, no problem.
Thank you, Matt.
Does anybody have anything else?
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am, we do too.
Up next, we have Judge Beeler with a grants overview.
Okay, you already know who I am, Carol Beeler. So I'm going to talk about grants a little bit tonight. I won't spend too long on it because I know I don't want to put you to sleep and you got other things to talk about. But I did hand out some materials and I'll refer to them as I go through, but they were more for you to take away. And then I'll email this slide deck to Jeremiah, Matt, whoever you tell me to, so that you'll have it as well.
Thank you.
So the things I was just going to touch on tonight in talking about grants is kind of like from my viewpoint, the important grant intersection points. Searching for the grants, applying or reapplying for the grants. Once you get a grant, bringing it to you all, and then establishing, basically how it's going to be spent. And then the administration process for the awarded grants. There's plenty of other intersection points, but I just thought those were some that I would highlight that would give you a good understanding of kind of at a very high level. So one thing I wanted to talk about is this distinction between some of the things that are involved in grant writing and in grant, acquisition and then also management. It's really important that if we're going to have people writing grants, that they, understand some of these things. Because in order to get grants, you have to understand that you're really looking at the funder and you're trying to focus on what are their objectives, what are their priorities, and can you then leverage that to accomplish things within our county that match up with their objectives and priorities. So it's basically having somebody that can, sift through, a lot of information and read things and try to think, okay, could we fit that into something that we're trying to do? What you don't really want to do is you don't want to just try to seek a grant to get money, but then you're really trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, because that's not going to work, and it's going to end up with a lot of problems when you go to start reporting out on your grant, because you can get awarded a grant sometimes, but then when they see what you're actually trying to accomplish and you're not accomplishing what their priorities and objectives were, then you're going to run into some problems. So I think sometimes that people just think grants are free money and they don't think about the fact that there has to be a level of understanding, of the needs of the funder, because they're giving you money for a reason. So, and whatever that reason is, people can have different ideas, but that's important. It's also really important, I'm not going to go through all these, to understand matching for the courts, and I'm only speaking for the courts. We always try to leverage with our wages and fringes that we're already expending, so that way it doesn't cost anybody anything extra, but that's something that we can show for our maintenance of effort, to show, hey, we're going to be putting this much money into this project already, and so we need some extra money from you. The criteria and deadlines are really important, and I can't emphasize enough, at least in the last few years, this has been a learning curve for us, understanding the grant submission requirements. The federal grants especially, you have to be signed up for their portals. A lot of times they'll tell you that it takes 2 to 4 weeks to get approval for their portals. Sometimes it takes 4 to 8 weeks to get that approval. So if you don't start soon enough to get the okay that you need from them to have access to their electronic portals, you can't even apply for the grant. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you've spent a whole bunch of your team's time pulling together all the information, going around and begging everybody to write you letters of support, and then find out, I'm not going to be able to submit this grant. And a lot of times, believe it or not, those portals, when there's a grant due at like 5 p.m. on a Friday, the system crashes at noon on Friday, and so everybody's like, so it just seems to happen a lot. So it's really important to plan ahead and have somebody that understands that, because that can also create a lot of problems. And just understanding the time component. A lot of times I think we want to go after money, but we will always need to make sure we have the bandwidth both for the writing of the grant, but then for the receiving of the grant, and then the administering the grant. There's some really great grants out there that we're looking at right now, for example, to cover some costs for the security cameras at the Law and Courts building. It's a very much less complicated grant process than some of our drug court grants. So that makes it more attractive for us to spend time doing that, because to fit in the time that it takes to look for all these grants and write all these grants, you can't spend all your time doing that because we have jobs to do as well. So it's just important to understand it's not just about finding it, it's having the bandwidth to do all that, because especially with the federal grants, they usually are very voluminous. And if you were to print out all the materials we submit, they would be, stacks high with all they want to know about us. Also, it's just really important that even if you're going to have somebody be kind of a centralized person that you have working on this stuff, to make sure you always have a subject matter expert on your team, because you need both the doers and the administrators. There's lots of terms of art. I know lawyers, they use lots of words that people are always like, what do those words mean? Well, I feel the same when I hear treatment providers or social workers or people, contractors or architects. We all have our own language, and so it's really important if you're seeking a grant from a particular kind of entity that you have somebody that understands that language. Because if you're talking to a cook, they're talking in terms of cups and tablespoons and all these things. And I know it sounds like I'm making it really simple, but if you can't speak that language, you're not going to be able to get that grant. And so it's really important to understand that going into grants. So I gave you a copy. One of the handouts was your own grant administration policy. I think it's important that you've all, looked at it and understand it, and make sure that you understand what each section means, because these policies can always be updated, and that would be something that you could take to your policy committee if you feel like updates are needed. And I'm not telling you to change it. I'm just saying if you think that the policy doesn't work out well for you all, that would be for somebody to take a look at in the policy committee. And sometimes policies, they just have to change over time, because, for example, one thing that I'm going to talk to you about is when the grant policy was written, the assumption was all grants would be submitted in paper. And so we had created a process where at the time this change kind of occurred, the prior county administrator was here, and we no longer were submitting those grants in paper, and so the policy says you have to give a complete copy of the grant application once it's ready to be submitted to the county administrator and finance director for their review to make sure what's going on. Well, when you're doing all this stuff through a portal, you can't print out the whole application. So we created a form in the courts, and that's also in your packet, that just kind of gives the highlight information. And then what happened for me, at least this spring, when I emailed all those forms to Matt and Jennifer emailed back and said, well, tell me about this, tell me about that, and asked for more information. And that allowed us to comply with the spirit of the grant policy. And there is a section in the grant policy that allows for basically the county administrator to say, yes, you can do something a little different than what the policy says, because the technology has made it so that we can't print out the whole grant application until after we hit the submit button. And that's just a component of technology. And more grants are going to a situation where basically you have screens and you enter data in, and then you go to the next screen and the next screen, and so that it basically populates all those screens together. So it's a little bit different process than maybe some of you are used to if you've ever applied for grants in the past. So I just wanted to focus on this because I know it's been a pain point for all of us as far as grant timing. Sometimes we don't find out about a grant opportunity until the last minute, but I think grants are a priority to us. I'm asking the question to all of you, I guess, literally and figuratively, but are they? If they are, then we should facilitate the ability to be agile so that we can apply for all grants that we have the opportunity to, because maybe they would be a good fit. We can always turn the money away if we don't later want it. And if we really want grants, we are at the mercy of the funder. So, if SAMHSA releases a grant and there's only a 30-day turnaround time, if we say we're going to apply for it, that's the time frame we're stuck with, no matter, what the needs are of the meeting schedule of everyone. So again, I'm not saying whether it is or not, but I've always thought that grants are a priority to us because we want to try to, get funding in other ways.
And you said that if we approved the grant, went through all the funding, regardless how painful that is, we can always turn it back in if it was something that the group thought was nefarious, for lack of better words?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, depending, I mean, like, you know, depending on who applies for the grants, I mean, you know, like, and I don't like to get into this debate, but like if I say, you know, like this is important to fund our drug court and you all say no, I think I probably have the ability to say, well, we want this money for our drug court because that's something that we're funding. But on things that are totally within your realm, definitely. And I think you would still have the ability to say, no, we're not going to, you know, let you accept this grant even for the courts, especially if there was matching or any kind of county money being used. But it's always something, that's why we bring it to you as part of the grant approval process. So that's the time to ask questions and et cetera. So anyway. And also, I just wanted to point out, we share grants with multiple counties sometimes. We do that, and I'm going to point out a few of the grants we have and that we do that. And that can also make the timing really complicated because we're not always the fiduciary, meaning we're not the ones managing the money. So Berrien County, for example, when we had our mental health court with them, they do all their processing totally different, and things that we were used to getting done in like a week, it takes them like 6 weeks because they just have a bigger process. And even though it sounds like they meet every week, but the way they do their financing and everything. So it's just getting used to, you know, what we expect might happen might be different in another county if we're working with them. So I just wanted to point out, and again, we don't have to spend any time on this, but under the policy that you all adopted or your predecessors, there is a grant acceptance provision. We have to notify the finance director. We bring it to the BOC for approval. And then the BOC also approves a line item budget related to the grant if there hasn't already been one established through the normal budgetary process. So for example, you know, we have grants in the courts that you already have given us line items for, so every year we just bring you that renewal grant. There's already a line item to fund, but we tell you then where to put the money for those grants. And I gave you a sample in your packet of something that you've seen before from us where we bring you a grant, the Raise the Age grant or the Child and Parent Legal Representation grant. The line items had already been established for these, and so it's money in, money out, and you're able to see that.
So you just said that if we have something that recurs every year, like that tire grant that we had, and we had another one that we say we do this every year, that's right there, you're saying, and it's been there.
Right, it's through, the grant policy says it's done through the normal budgetary process.
Yeah.
It would not be like a special thing that we'd come to a presentation on. Now, we can always come to a presentation if you want us to, but that's why I always ask, like, do you want me to come talk again about child care fund or whatever the topic is? Because if we're doing it every year, after a certain amount of time, some of you have been here for a number of years, you don't want to hear the same presentation again. And the policy that you have says we don't have to, that if it's already gone through the normal budgetary process, that you would have to approve, say that you need to sign, we need the signature of the chair, that would have to be approved by the board. But the actual, you know, funding of the line items and stuff wouldn't because it's gone through the normal budgetary process.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say too, some of it depends on the grant itself, like, you know, some of them, like, it may be like, we have it, it's incorporated into the budget, and so technically there's no board approval, but maybe the grant actually requires the chair of the board to sign it or something. So I mean, some of it's gonna be grant specific too.
We've had that before too.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned a packet that you handed out with the information.
It's right in front of your computer, I'm sorry, I should have pointed it out better.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
So grant acceptance also is just, the thing I wanted to ask is just in terms of, you know, I think that you all have to agree, what's the process you want us to utilize to ensure we're on the same page about how the acceptances are handled? The policy says, for example, that if it can be handled through the normal budgetary process, unless, like Matt pointed out, the grant source wants us to get your approval, that we don't have to get your approval to, you know, to go forward with it because we already told you we're getting this grant, we're getting this money, and we assume we've got everybody's blessing. But if things need to be different, then it's just a matter of communication. So that to me is what's important. And I try to always ask, but, and I just think that it's really important, at least from my viewpoint, for you to understand that they can be very good for funding and they are very labor intensive. And so grace is going to be required because when we're juggling in grant season, you know, numerous grants, I'm not saying it as an excuse, but sometimes we forget that then it's going to need to come to the cow or that we need to make sure we heard back because sometimes the people we communicate with, the funders, they don't respond to our emails in a timely fashion. And so then we're looking at a last minute situation where I have to then, email Matt or Jeremiah and say, hey, can we get this on the agenda, and will somebody sponsor it for us? Because we're trying to do the best we can, but the turnaround times are so short. So the county does have many grants, and I know I'm speaking from my experience, but all of your elected officials bring in grants. You know, we've got the land bank grants, we've got child support grants, we've got, that are both in the FOC and PA, we've got sheriff grants, community corrections. You can see the whole list, and I don't have to go through all of them, but some of those grants on there, like the Access to Visitation grant, that's a multi-county grant between Berrien, Van Buren, and us. We're not the fiduciary. It's in our budget process every year, so that's why we don't come to you and tell you about it. We don't handle the money, but we get reimbursed when we do services for children that have supervised parenting time with their parents. It's a very small grant, and it wouldn't be worth it for us to manage it alone, because I think we only get something like $3,000, but hey, every $3,000 helps. So, and we account for that in our budget. So just to give you, you know, an idea of all the different things that are going on, I just wanted to make a chart, because certainly it's not all about the courts. So I also put in your packets materials from MIDC, because I thought it was timely, because there was some debates about that going on. And I kind of intimated to this before, but you know, before, when MIDC first started, I was the liaison that went to all the planning meetings for MIDC, because originally it was kind of a court-driven project, and then eventually it was determined courts should not be involved in the MIDC, because we're the ones hearing cases as a judge, you know, hearing defense and prosecution. And just like Victor, I am not involved in the inner workings of his office as the prosecutor, that the court shouldn't be involved in the public defenders. But the reason I thought that it would be a good example for you to give to you is because I know the whole story with how MIDC started in Cass County. So I wanted to share some of those materials with you. Because I think sometimes too, the reason we have to give each other grace is sometimes when you know the whole story, I don't repeat the whole story every time that then I talk to somebody about the topic, because I kind of make that false assumption sometimes that people understand what's going on, for example, with MIDC. So, you know, I think it's really important when you look at MIDC to think about, well, what is it really? It's really about talking about we have to provide attorneys for people who have no money. That goes back to Gideon versus Wainwright, a Supreme Court case. I didn't make that law. That's the law of the land. So you need to ask yourself questions. How was criminal defense provided and paid for pre-MIDC? Well, it was funded 100% by the county. That's the story.
Yes, it was.
So look at then the enabling legislation for MIDC, and I gave that to you in the materials that I handed out. And that allowed for a situation where what happened was there was a task force, and they said, you know, we keep saying we want to make things better all around the state because some counties had a lot of public defenders, some had none. And they said, well, it's really unfair for us to tell the counties what they have to do and not give them any money. So the MIDC was born, and they basically created some standards to say, if we're going to tell people how to run their public defender program, we're going to have to provide some money. So they established the baseline in 2013 and looked to what every county in Michigan was paying for public defense in 2013, and that's the county share moving forward for public defense. So the good news about MIDC is your cost for providing public defenders is set at that 2013 level by the enabling legislation, and I gave that to you in your packet. I also gave you a copy of the compliance plan that I worked hard on drafting in coordination with a lot of other people, and you can see it was signed by several of the commissioners at the time, and that was what was required to get started with MIDC, and then it's gone from there. And then after that, and it gives a little background, so I thought that was helpful for those of you who weren't around when MIDC came into effect. Then the minimum standards for criminal defense services, this is really what drives what we're mandated to do. So they have standards, and the first standards were adopted right away, then they passed 4 more. One of the standards relates to the position and what happened with this year's MIDC grant. So I also provided you with some of the funding and compliance requirements and gave you a screenshot of the website. All of you can go to that website and see what all the grant requirements are. They're lengthy, and I'm sure you can get copies from Matt or Jennifer, whomever's storing those. of all the compliance plans since November of 2017. I have all the ones that I was in charge of until I turned it over to the county, and 2020, I think, was when that happened. And I'm sure they have copies of all the other ones, but I also gave them my file then. So if you have questions about those prior plans, you know, they're lengthy, there's contracts, but you can get copies of all those. But it is complex, and I just wanted to give it as an example because grants have a lot of moving parts. And, you know, it's just impossible in a presentation to really fully, you know, give you all the nuts and bolts of any particular grant, but I thought maybe that would be helpful to give you just some overview of that process. So I think I went over 10 minutes, I apologize, but.
You don't have no time limit, man. I asked you to do this.
So I tried to talk as fast as I could and not give you too much information, so.
Go ahead.
I want to begin by thanking you for taking the time to come here today and explain this process. It's,
No problem.
Still learning. Do you mind going back to the beginning slide?
Sure. If I can use
One
technology.
more. I'm sorry, 3 slides in. There it goes. So the reason I want to focus on this is because this really tells a story about the grant, and this is the information that can be challenging sometimes, and I understand that there's a lot that's involved, just as you explained. So I guess what I was asking, as I was kind of talking with some of the other commissioners, was would it be possible to put together a grant calendar in order to not necessarily spell out all the details, but you've kind of already described that we've got this information that's being filled out and submitted to the administrator and the finance director, but is it a way that we can just start incorporating technology in a way that we can just have this more readily available for us to view?
For the ones that we have, of course, for the ones that we're just looking for to apply for, we don't know what the timing is on those. So until you're awarded a grant, you're not going to know what the timing is, so.
Would it be feasible to even insert that information for a grant that has been applied for?
Well, if you look on the handout I gave to you, that's why I gave it to you as an example. When we tell the county that we're applying for a grant, what we do is tell them when is it due and what is the term of the grant, so that gives information as to that. But at the time that we apply for it, we don't know when the award will be, because what happens, for example, even on our grants we get every year for drug courts from SCAO, the grant applications are due in June, and I put that on this one that I gave you, June 2nd it was due. They're supposed to make a decision before the start of the fiscal year, which is October 1st. We haven't heard anything yet. We could hear anything between now, October 1st. There have been years we haven't had an answer until after October 1st. So then, once we get that answer, then it's when we're in crunch time because we want to get the money. So then the question becomes, like I asked in the one slide, if it's a recurring grant, do you want us to squeeze it in so we can start spending the money? Because until you all say we can start spending the money, then we've got an issue, because I've got people working on these grants that need to get paid. So I have to either tell them, stop working, which, you know, or I have to, you know, get this approved as soon as possible. So what you're asking about, I mean, that would be something for you guys to figure out with Matt as your county administrator. He gets these so he could put some information together, but that doesn't really tell him like exactly what the timing is going to be, because the timing is, again, up to the funder. If the funder says, for example, we're running 3 weeks behind, like we have a federal grant right now that we're getting rollover on, we've been told it's going to be approved, but they're 4 weeks behind in the approval process because you have to submit something online. It's called a GAM, and then they let you know. I emailed the other day and she said, well, we think it's getting approved, but you know, we're still 2 weeks behind. Well, the start of the fiscal year is October 1st. Well, who knows, the federal government might shut down. We don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, you know, if any of those things happen, we might not get notification until later in October. I don't know what'll happen.
The day after our cow, that's when it'll be.
Well, yeah, so, I don't know, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I guess there's a lot of unknowns on the timing of it. We do know when the grant's due,
Sure.
but
But you guys are filling this out, right? Whether it's your office, the sheriff's office, who's
I don't know how other people do things. I'm giving you an example of what I do to comply with the grant policy.
Okay. So maybe I guess what I'm looking for is something that should be taken up with the policy committee, because what I would like to see is this information to be put out, either using Microsoft Teams, whatever platform available to all of us, so that we can at least see this information, because I have never seen one of these.
Well, you wouldn't. I mean, it goes to Matt, so it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the policy, that's,
Yeah.
administration would review those and
Yeah.
then.
Well, and that's for you guys to decide. Say, for example, you get 20 of these in a month. Do you want to see all 20, or do you want him to prepare a report for your cow that says there's 20 grants that have been applied for this month?
Not
Like, that could be a regular report out. I don't know, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying there's ideas of how you could share that information.
I'm just thinking of more of a simplistic approach. I know that grant calendars do exist, and there's very easy templates out there, and I think just
Well, I don't know what you mean by a grant calendar. So like, we manage, right now, I've probably, Okay.
Putting it in an Excel document, any other grant that's out there that's already been applied for, putting it on a document that we all have visibility to.
oh, okay, so you mean more of a shared information template?
Precisely.
Okay.
It would help to have some background
Grants that are
on the
applied
grants.
for, or grants that we are looking to apply to?
Whether we're applying for them or they're active.
I think he's saying if you end up receiving one of these, he'd like that shared, right?
Well, yeah, but I would think we can just put that in a format that we can see all of them.
Well, and again, I don't know how much you want to recreate the wheel. If you agree upon a form that you want us all to use, I'll use it. I can't speak for anybody else. But then I don't know why you would convert that into anything else. I would just store it somewhere so you all could look at it. But that's just me. I try to never reduplicate effort, but
Sorry, employees.
Well, and the one thing too is, I guess, just to put this out there, I mean, like, with the administration office and our finance director in general, I mean, if somebody was ever curious about wanting to look at those, we could make those available at any point. I mean,
Yeah,
that
but
wouldn't be difficult.
it's not knowing what's out there that's kind of challenging sometimes.
It would be nice if we could create a folder, and this, or whatever department is writing grants, they could put this in the folder, scan it into the folder, and it could be categorized and with date, so that we can periodically go in and look at it, so that we know what's coming up or what's.
I hear what you're saying, and I like to know what's going on as far as, because I'm chief judge with all of my stuff, so I have a way that I have people share that information with me. That's where I say it's for you to figure out and to tell your employee, which is Matt, and again, I'm not telling you what to do, but to tell him how do you want him to store and share that information, or for him to suggest an idea about that to you all. But that's what we do is, we have drug court grants going on with all the judges. I don't require them to provide me, 300 pages of materials for each of those grants, because I don't have the time to read them. They just let me know, hey, we applied for a SAMHSA grant, it's for this much, yada, yada. It's a very short, and then I say, great, sounds good. If we can get that money, great. I mean,
This
that's
is
the
good,
thing.
because it's a summary of what it is.
So,
Sam just answered the question, how to fix that, it goes to the policy committee.
It was a policy committee.
Yeah,
Policy committee decides what they want to do and how they
Yeah.
want to do it, and we
That's-
vote on it and present it to Matt.
yeah, and then it comes to our cows, and then we vote on the next business
The
meeting.
policy committee can bring forth a recommendation, but yet we
Yeah.
can still tailor it out.
Yeah.
well, and especially since you already have that written grant policy, that's the perfect place to insert whatever it is you want to see.
Absolutely.
Now,
So-
that website crash, I know, because that's that one site that
There we go.
everybody in the nation is using, of course it's gonna crash.
Yeah.
It does every time.
Yeah, well, and 2 years ago, they moved to a different platform called Just Grants, and they hadn't even got it operational, and then they said, oh, by the way, we shut off our old one, but the other new one isn't working, so,
Of course.
Anybody else have anything?
anyway,
Thank you, Carol.
Thank
You're
you, man.
welcome.
I
Very much.
Really appreciate
Very
it.
You're
good,
welcome.
Carol. Very good.
Really
Yep,
appreciate
thank you.
it. That's a lot of work.
Moving on to number 10, committee reports. Do we have any committee chairs or participants who'd like to give a report?
Mine will be very brief. Human Services Coordinating Council met September 13th, and Heather Cole of United Way delivered the United Way's annual report. The County Planning Commission approved Milton Township's new ordinance on wind and solar power, and that was the best, really, that we've ever seen. And they got help from MSU Extension to do it. It was quite good. That's it for me, for that.
Southwestern Michigan Behavioral Health met on Monday. We had a good meeting. They had several people come in from organizations that have been helped by that. So just kind of a background, that's where all the 2A money, all the alcohol tax money goes into that, and it's going to help treat people that are suffering with an addiction, or if they have a mental disorder. That's kind of what that's focused on. And then we pass the budget for the year, and so that money will then go to Woodlands to help take care of those issues. It was a good meeting. I got a couple other things that came out of it that I found interesting, so I'm hoping I can follow up with a couple of the people, and then we can kind of have something come out of it.
Right. I got one.
Go ahead.
I'm not the chair of the Board of Health, but I'm the vice chair. But I chaired our last meeting of the Board of Health for Cass Van Buren. And Matt emailed all of us the monthly status report.
I
So
saw that.
not gonna report on that, but that's what me and Mary see. And then we can come and report it. But if you send it out like I asked them to, then that alleviates us from having to report on that.
It was excellent.
But there is one question I asked, because I've been getting a lot of phone calls and emails about masks and vaccines and the threat or the possibility of them coming back and being mandatory by the state or by whoever. So I asked a question to the health director. Whose decision is that? Would that be the board's decision, the Board of Health's decision? Would be that the county Board of Health or the county commissioners? Whose decision is that? And she told me that it is her decision solely, and I didn't know that. So I asked her also if, I'm getting distracted. I asked her also if, say you make that decision and we don't like that as the board, and we tell you something otherwise, then she said that would be in detriment to that organization. They'd face fines and lawsuits from the state and from the federal areas. So it's complicated. I didn't like that answer. You know, I thought for sure.
Just for voicing your opinion as a board?
Yeah, we can't, well, no, not our opinion, but if, say as a board, we say, because I didn't speak for Van Buren, but I spoke for Cass County, saying, well, if Jeremiah is the chair of this board, don't want to do that, what happens? Then county health department will get sued for us, and then the rest of our community probably won't have a health department in Dowagiac to get the services that people need, like the vaccinations that people want them, or the dental care, the health care, and stuff like that. Plus, we'd face fines. I don't know if I want to be, I don't look good in orange. You know, and I don't know if I want to be responsible for that. But that was the answer she gave me. That ain't my decision, it ain't my answer, but that was something I've been getting a lot of questions about, so I figured I'd put that out in public. That way, maybe that'll alleviate some of those emails.
Anybody else?
Yes. I've been appointed to the Historic Commission, and my first meeting was last Thursday. It was very enjoyable. We laughed. Everybody got along real well. They're working on a couple things. Bull Laser Works in Cass bought a pallet of red bricks, and for $25, if you would donate $25, they'll engrave your name on this brick, and then they'll make this sidewalk from the parking lot all the way to the back door. So everybody's name could be in the sidewalk. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Also, they are working on the front porch. It's about ready to fall in. It's been pulling away from the house and causing damage to the house. So, and they don't have a railing, so they're in badly need of railing for that. They're afraid that it could be a lawsuit if somebody would slip and fall on that too. So that's what they're working on. But it was a very enjoyable meeting, and I look forward to being on the commission.
Anybody else? All right, we'll go to district reports. Commissioner Lawrence, do you have anything?
I was informed by Chair Jones that the Indians had, he was speaking with the Indians on our ambulance service, and they may be committing an ambulance to the county. So.
Well, they're interested in partnering.
Yes.
Yeah, they're interested in partnering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, I thought that was a great thing, and I'm all for it. And we definitely, at some point in time, as a board, need to talk about our ambulance service.
Yeah, well, I can speak on that because I'm on the revenue sharing board with the tribe. And we brought that up with the crisis with the ambulance services. And the tribe properties are in the affected area. and they asked me how much it would cost. And off the top of my head, because I'm not on that board or an expert, I'd said it, one, and I think in Onto was $600,000 a year for one rig. And they're still coming up short as either Onto or Howard. I don't remember which one. So I told them that I would say $1 million per year would give us coverage for one rig. That's just one rig. But the problem is getting the people to operate it, you know? But if we had that $1 million, the $400,000 additional to the $600,000, maybe we could increase wages or benefits to make it more attractive for people to want to even go into that field. So they're going to discuss it. The board for the ambulance service is going to discuss it. Then when it comes to us, whether that be through me, Matt, or whoever here, you know, as the commissioners, then we can discuss it as a county to see what the other townships are doing. But I'll be happy to spearhead that if it comes to that point later on in the future.
And I'd be happy to help you with that, too,
All right.
if you need any help with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is that all you had?
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Locke?
Just, in Marcellus, they're going to have a festival, Oktoberfest, even though it's September 30th. And it's from 3 o'clock to question mark at the Columbian Park to raise funds to save and rebuild the tailgate building downtown in Marcellus. So I just encourage, if you're interested in doing something that Saturday, to head to Marcellus.
Any questions for him? You got anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay, moving on. Commissioner Howie? You already went, sorry. Commissioner Barrera?
Milton Township has completed the construction of a gazebo, and they got really nice picnic tables that they've set out, so very proud of the work that they were doing there. That place is really used a lot for rentals, and I think this is gonna help with getting more bookings in the future and generating revenue for that township, so I just wanna thank them for the work that they're doing.
Any questions for him? Commissioner Marquetti?
I participated in the Fall Festival at the Otwood Township Edwardsburg Fire Station, and it was extremely well attended. It was a first-time joint venture of the Chamber of Commerce and Area Artists Group. There were 78 vendors, 5 food trucks, a bounce house, obstacle course, and big bubbles. Ottawa has 2 events coming up. A library open house featuring renderings of the new library, and that's on October 5th. From 4 to 6 p.m. And then Ottawa Township and the Village of Edwardsburg are holding an open house on October 12th from 4 to 7 p.m. on their joint master plan project.
Any questions for her? Commissioner Lee?
Mason Township finished they did all that playground, now they have the walk path, it's really, really nice. You should definitely come see it, they did an amazing job. Outside of that, Calvin Township is still having a few complaints about marijuana growth that's being done in Penn. And then, just because I have to say this to have my conscience be clear, you talk about being an orange when it comes to the health department. I would wear orange before I'd force anybody in this county to get vaccinated. I'm sorry, I just have to say that.
Any questions for Commissioner Lee? I just want to give everybody a reminder of the event at the drive-in. That's Sunday night, starts at 6 p.m. for Sobriety Month at the 5 Mile Drive-in there in Silver Creek Township. Moving on to the administrator's report.
My report is in the packet. A couple things I'll touch on real quick. I am really excited. As everybody knows, I think we've been working through the congressionally directed spending grant. It was actually applied for in May of 2021. And we started doing a lot of work on this last October. So it's been nearly a year since we started the actual application process with USDA. And as of a week ago, we finally were notified that the grant is approved. So that's going to provide $1.5 million towards the courthouse, and then part of the construction delay had been we were not allowed to do anything while the grant approval process was happening. So Very soon in the coming weeks, you're gonna see the construction activities start to ramp up over there and work actually is beginning. So very exciting times with respect to that. It's been a long process, but I'm glad everything went through well and we've gotten there. I guess I'll touch on accounts payable a little bit as well. We've talked about this a little bit before, but as we get into the new fiscal year, we're gonna be working on trying to look at some pretty big changes with accounts payable processes. And the whole idea is actually to really make things simpler for all of our departments and offices. So right now, I think where we run into some struggles is there's kind of, we have a policy in place, but if you go to each office and you look at how everybody kind of does it, there's a little bit of inconsistency. And not that there's a wrong way per se that anybody's doing it, but what we really want to do is try to really focus on a procedure manual that gives everybody kind of an outline of here's how this should be processed. Here's the steps to do it so that everybody's on the same page. A lot of it, I think, at the county has really been kind of passed down through like word of mouth and kind of person-to-person training over the years. So looking at trying to have a manual that somebody, especially if there's somebody new, can come in and say, oh, how do I do this? And being able to go, oh, here's a manual that shows you, here's some videos to watch on how to do this, will be big. And I think the other part of that process is once we have that in place, working to streamline the system so that we can actually eliminate some of the paper exchanges that have to happen for payments to occur. There's ways to be able to attach documents right in our software. The approval process can be handled all digitally. I think there's some training and other things we have to do to get there, but we're shooting for kind of late fall to have everything in place for the new system. And I think once we get a chance to get everybody on the same page, I think it'll be a really good thing for everyone. I mean, you guys actually that look at it can probably attest to this. When we get bills, it's a stack of paper that's probably 500 sheets thick. So being able to kind of eliminate some of that and go to the software and see a list and be able to click and easily go through everything would be a lot simpler for everybody. The last thing I guess I'll touch on real quick is with the emergency repair loan program. We haven't scheduled our public hearing for that yet. That'll be coming probably next month. But I wanted to give a little bit of information on the stats. We actually have a lot more money for program year 2022. So essentially the way they track it is funding that runs through, I think, June of that year, then supplies the funding for the following year. So for all the activity in 2023 was from 22. We had, I believe it was $91,607 in funding. I think the previous year was 50, so it was almost double that. With that, we completed 11 projects across the county, including projects in the city of Wajak, Vandalia, Niles, Cassopolis, and Marcellus. And then of that total, we had $5,420.98 that was left over. Unfortunately, that goes back to the state, but part of the idea with the program is it's ended now. And in any year where you receive more than $35,000, you have two choices. You either continue the program as you have, issuing emergency repair loans, or you just have to give it back to the state anyway. So I think even though there was again, like the year before, there was a little bit of money left over. Sometimes when you get to that last little bit, it's hard to find a project that fits exactly in that. But I think having that amount of money, we were concerned about giving a lot of tens of thousands of dollars back. So I think it was still turned out really well. This next year, unfortunately, the funding is going to be a little bit lower. We're going to have right about $35,000 in funds. So a lot less work will happen through the CDBG program, but that's where I think my hope and some of the other programs out there are going to be able to probably fill in that gap, hopefully. And that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions for me.
So thank you for giving that update. I would like to see going forward, though, that we do discuss everything that's on your packet, and not just say that there's items in the packet. You did touch on a few of them. A couple here that you left out that I'll go ahead and discuss for everyone. Interlocal agreements for facilities, marketing, and communications and IT services are being discussed, showcasing the county's unique approach in integration services. Also, applications are being reviewed for the public defender's administrator's role, and the role is expected to be filled in mid-October. I do have some questions regarding some of the subjects that you discussed here today. First, we'll begin with the historical courthouse project. What are the key milestones and objectives that we should be aware of during the construction phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working with our owner's rep on that. I mean, I think there's going to be with the construction process, I mean, I think it's broken down into a couple different key categories. This will actually be posted, once we actually get to the construction, to our website, and then obviously give it to the commissioners as well. But there's, I think, probably 7 or 8 different major milestones, like for example, kind of the footings for the stairwell. The central staircase is kind of one of the first big ones. And then I think there's going to be some like saw cutting, framing and rough-ins that have to happen. And then you get to drywall insulation, some of those things. So certainly we'll be sharing those kind of key metrics and what the schedule looks like. You know, that's something that they're still finalizing now with you know, the way that we're kind of getting the funding squared away. They have a schedule that's kind of been adapting as time has gone on. So it started, originally we had a schedule that started, I think, in February. And then since the grant has kind of carried out, that's kind of pushed the schedule out a little bit. So they've had to tweak things a little bit. But once we have that finalized, that'll go up on the website as well and be shared with commissioners also.
All right, next, can you provide more details on the interlocal agreements, including the benefits and goals for these agreements for the county?
Sure. Well, we have one that we're gonna, or that's been in place now for the last year, and I think we actually were planning to discuss tonight as well. That's the interlocal agreement for facility services. With that, part of it is that when you look at our partner agencies across the county, so in this case it would be medical care facility, road commission, council on aging, and woodlands as proposed in the one for tonight. That'd be a new addition, but you have a lot of duplication of services that can happen. You know, so you might have a maintenance director or facilities director at 4 different locations, and everybody's kind of paying for that same service to be kind of siloed in their own area. And in some cases, when you start looking at budgets and things too, you're at capacity in terms of what you can afford, right? I mean, so for every entity, especially our intergovernmental units, you're always trying to figure out, hey, how do I make a dollar stretch further? How do we save money in certain areas? So kind of the way this started was looking at, potentially a different avenue to be able to kind of share in costs. Could we bring in someone that might have more expertise and be able to reduce our reliance on outside vendors, for example? Because that's one thing you see a lot, right? You might have folks that in a traditional maintenance team, they can troubleshoot basic issues, but when it comes to major mechanical or HVAC issues, they might say, well, that's beyond our scope, we're gonna have to call in a contractor. And then you're dealing with the hourly rates from contractors, parts markups, truck charges, things like that. So even simple repairs can become a very expensive item. So part of this was like, well, can we find somebody that might be able to kind of fill in that role and maybe save the county significant sums of money, in that we don't have to rely on those outside vendors anymore. We can utilize somebody to be able to do that, and that's where our facilities director has been huge in that. Before, we had a pretty significant cost every year of reaching out to outside firms to come in, whether it was HVAC or mechanical, plumbing related concerns. We didn't have the expertise in-house to be able to fix a lot of those things. But part of the challenge to the county was, okay, well, in those cases where you're hiring somebody that has that knowledge and the skills for that, you're probably seeing a bit higher cost. So how do we absorb that in some way that makes sense? And so it was reaching out to our partner agencies and saying, hey, what if we shared in the cost of some of this? And we worked through a couple different models and how that worked, and ultimately decided on kind of a time and materials sort of scenario, where basically all of our partners under the facilities agreement pay for any material costs. They pay it for that out of pocket. So we would procure any materials that are necessary, and then each on the monthly invoice, they actually pay for any material costs that we incurred. And then we have an hourly rate that we use, factoring in like fringe benefits, things like that, from Dave, to ensure that his time is offset from those local, from that he's spent at any intergovernmental units as well too. So I think it's twofold, right? I mean, I think the county, as well as all of our agencies, save on external costs we might see that would be a pretty significant portion of funds. We're reducing those potential expenses. And I think by having somebody with that level of expertise, we're able to really tackle much larger projects than we ever would have been able to before. So we're actually able to go out and look and accomplish things rather than, let me call somebody. And I think with the other ones, I can say, the marketing one we were gonna talk about tonight, that actually came from the medical care facility is actually driving that one. They have an existing agreement with a provider that deals with their website, as well as press releases and news content. A lot of it, I think, is really trying to help them, direct residents or potential residents of the facility to the website to get them the information they need. The other thing they have is rehabilitation services that they offer. They're really trying to build that out. We've had several examples we've heard of people that have had a need for rehabilitation services following, say, cardiac issues, things like that, and were not aware that they had a rehab facility right here, 5 minutes away that was able to do that. So some folks are actually traveling, outside the county to go get those services. So they approached us and said, we'd really like to, based on our positive experiences with the facilities agreement, we'd really like to, work with you on kind of expanding what we can do marketing-wise and sharing that with you guys as well, too. So in that example, again, that's later on the agenda, but the medical care facility would pay a fixed amount that would cover the services we've proposed providing. So I think the benefit there is, I think that allows us tighter integration with our partners in terms of working together, which I think is a good thing, as well as bringing in additional revenues that we wouldn't have anticipated before. So I think, the one thing to keep in mind with all of these is that, we've been very clear, I think, up front that the county's interests are central. So we are not embarking upon any of these agreements with the idea that, the county is playing second fiddle at all. I mean, we are the primary, user of the services, we're the primary driver of it, we're the employer of record on these cases. So our agent, we've worked with our partner agencies on this, and they understand, obviously the obligations are to the county first, but I think we've shown that we've been able to actually expand that too. And then the IT part, very similar story. Road Commission and medical care facility in particular had agreements with outside vendors to deal with all of our network infrastructure, help desk support, assistance with things like ordering supplies, things along those lines, and they were paying pretty significant sums. And we do all of that here at the county anyway. And so there was a conversation that happened and said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could just work with the county to be able to offer these services, and maybe we could do that in a more cost-effective way. And so we explored that and looked at it and found that with the medical care facility and the road commission, we did have great avenues to be able to offer our services to them. We were able to do it at a point where I think it brings revenue into the county, but also resulted in a cost savings for the entities. And now they have, somebody that they know. I mean, it's not some company that's in Lansing somewhere where, you call and who am I gonna get? They know they're gonna get, Jody, or they're gonna get John, or Connor, for example, and we're able to build relationships with that too. I mean, the medical care facility is a prime example where they had some pretty significant challenges with their network infrastructure. Employees were having trouble being able to have reliable connections to be able to do their work, and their existing provider really wasn't fixing that. And so, we really took a holistic approach to that and said, well, how can we do this better? And how can this be something where we can provide value to your employees and help out, an agency that is obviously a component unit of the county that provides critical services to the elderly of our community. And we were able to do that as well. Now, we do have to finalize what the IT agreement is gonna look like. There is a temporary agreement in place. It's kind of like, I think it's a set amount per month based on while the work is ongoing. But we anticipate, when we've had conversations about this, that we will have a final agreement that's gonna be more than likely get a monthly amount that will offset the county's resources that we would expend into offering those services as well.
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
I know we've talked about the accounts payable process, and specifically about going paperless. So other than that, what other changes or improvements are planned regarding accounts payable?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is, and it's not as simple, I guess, as it sounds, is that with the paperless system, I mean, it's not as simple as like flipping a switch. I mean, I think part of it is there are certain processes that somebody would have to complete to be able to do that. So we found that out as we were working through. It was like we had a setting, global setting in the software that we said, oh, we'll print each attachment when we print checks. And we did that and come to find out like it didn't work. And we were like, well, how did that work? It should have worked. And so we talked to the software provider and they said, oh, well, you have to go to this screen and then there's this box and you gotta check this box. And that tells, you know, the software what to print. And, you know, so we've had a lot of things like that where we're working through that. I mean, one of the big things I think is working through the approval system. So, and you know, I guess the audit, perfect example. So our audit providers are gonna come in every year and say, we need to look at a sample of 20 or 30 checks. Or maybe 50 checks, depending on what they may request. So we have to go through and provide those. Our system up to this point, you know, predating me, I mean, it's been years, has basically been whenever we run checks, we've got copies of checks and we attach, you know, whatever invoices are there and they get put into a file cabinet based on the date they were processed. Well then, you know, and so if they give you a list of here's what you gotta look for, I mean, it takes some time to go through and figure out where is that. I mean, when we get to a system like this, I can pull it up and somebody can call me and say, Matt, I need to know what's going on with this check number or, you know, this vendor. We can pull that up and see every invoice that was ever done. We can see the checks that were there. I can print all of that for the auditors. And with the approvals, if we get to a point where all the approvals are digital as well, you can have an audit history right in our software where you'll see the department that entered it, the department head or, you know, person that was responsible for approvals that approved that, the approval from the county administrator, you know, and the whole audit history of how that happened. The other major thing that we talked about as part of the budget cycle is really looking at pushing more vendors to, you know, utilize electronic payment options where possible. So, you know, I think when you start looking at ACH options, the goal would be to reduce mailing costs. So you don't have to deal with the envelopes, you don't have to deal with postage costs. There's less delay in terms of getting a payment to a vendor.
That's gonna be significant savings.
Yeah, and I think procedurally, you know, there's a number of things. So a good example right now is that when we make payments, that week, everybody kind of inputs the due date as whatever date the check's gonna be. Well, that's not really necessarily when the due date of the invoice is. So we're kind of wanting to change that system entirely to say, well, that may have been how we did it before, but and it was kind of communicated that you don't enter invoices until the week we run checks. Nobody does that. So there's this mad scramble, you know, at the end of a week or at the beginning of a week to say, oh, I've got to have all these entered by Tuesday. And then I've got to get them over to the administration office and all printed. And it just is very hectic, I think, for a lot of departments, and there's really not a reason for it. By moving to something like this, departments can enter invoices whenever they get them. We do a pay now week right now, which is basically somebody can say, oh, this is due real quick and I need to get it done and it needs to go out tomorrow, you know, for whatever reason. You know, there's obviously a multitude of reasons that we talked about in policy committee. We're talking about if we can really get a system like this in place, it would be reasonable for us to do a pay every week. Because we wouldn't have to be trying to work with a system that really isn't necessarily, it's a little more cumbersome. I mean, if everybody gets an invoice, you put it in that day and we pay based on when it's due and we just pay every week.
Yeah, makes sense.
It eliminates the whole need for pay nows. We just cut checks every week and we're good. So I think, you know, I mean, there's a lot of kind of moving pieces to it, but I think our goal is really to make it simpler for everyone. You know, we don't want it to be more complicated. We want to try to make it easier for everybody.
Very good. I'm excited about that. Thank you so much.
I am too.
Any other questions? I don't believe the finance director is here, but if anybody has any questions, we can direct them to Matt to see if he can help.
I can give a couple updates. I know Jen was going to talk about it.
Feel free.
So the House, it's in the packet, but the House Local Government Committee is looking to introduce a bill that would set up a revenue sharing trust fund. So that's actually a really positive thing.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I know Mac has really been a big supportive component of all of this as well too. So with state shared revenue, actually having a dedicated fund where that gets paid into, so you can kind of protect it from getting robbed in cases where the state has, you know, budget shortfalls. To go, oh well, we're going to take this money. If you can have a trust fund set up and designated for that, it would be really big in terms of ensuring the long-term viability. I think, maybe you were here, Roseanne, I don't remember, but There was, I think, a couple of years where like, it was really dramatically reduced, or I think it was eliminated one time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that can be really debilitating. I mean, we're talking in some cases, $180,000, $200,000, which I know isn't huge in the grand scheme of things, but that can be a big, depending on how tight the budget is, that can be a pretty big impact.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing, we're really excited, we hope that that goes through. And then with the veterans property tax exemption, we did a quick estimate on what that would be for reimbursements to the local units, and I believe it was right around $60,000. So again, not a huge amount, but I think for the local units and things, that can be a big factor too.
Yeah, depending on which one.
Any questions?
I only have one question in this section. How does the estimated unassigned fund balance for September 30th, 2023 align with the county's financial goals and obligations?
How does the estimated unassigned fund balance align with our goals and objectives, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Well, I guess the one key thing to keep in mind is that we probably won't truly have a final, what is that number?
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people ask us about that, but it really takes about 60 days for us to really get to what that final ending fund balance is. Partly because the way that accounting systems would work is that, it's accrual based, so whenever there's an expense, we have to record that in the period where it was incurred, or if it's revenue, in the period it was earned. So taxes, as they come in after the fact, would actually get rolled back into that time frame, I believe. And then expenditures, we have a lot of like bills, for example, like utilities. You may pay that bill in September, but it was for, August service. So there's that last month where there's those sorts of things where we're gonna get a bill that comes October 12th, but it's actually for something from September that we have to roll back into the prior year. So there's usually I'd say about a 60-day time frame where we do that. And so we would probably have a pretty good idea on whether that estimated, unassigned fund balance is what we think it is, or if it's different. I mean, so I can tell you, like, when you look at, for example, tax proceeds at the moment, on the revenue side, they are not at what level we'd anticipate, but, tax collections just finished up at the local units on the 14th, I believe, and they have reconciliations they do, and then that gets uploaded to ours, and then, so there's a whole system that goes into that, and it just takes some additional time. I mean, I think, what I can say is I think the estimated fund balance that's there is what we had anticipated so far. That's what we're putting that there, but, again, we'll know the actual true results, and so, when you look at the expenditures the county incurred over the last year, as well as offset against the revenues, what did that actually look like? Was it a $1.8 million allocation for fund balance, or was it less? I think that'll actually be very informative for all of us to be able to see that. Was it 1.2? Was it 500,000? Do we have a surplus? I mean, I don't anticipate that, but I don't want to speculate either. We'll know as we get to it.
Very good, thank you.
Anything else on that? Moving on to the veterans report. I thought I saw her standing back there.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. For veterans I can't even talk tonight. Veterans contact for the month of August was 215. Increase from July to August in veterans benefit was 59,844.72. For a grand total as of now is $3,137,024.35. Unfortunately, for this past fiscal year, we have had 25 veterans pass away in our county. That's pretty much all I have at this moment, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any county partners present would like to speak? Please.
Thank you. With the permission of the chair, I have some materials I'd like to distribute to the board.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Got counter, right?
I won't start your timer until after everybody gets it.
Oh, let me step away from the
Keep talking, go ahead, keep talking.
Are y'all sick of seeing me yet? You can say yes. Good evening, esteemed Board of Commissioners and members of the general public. Stand before you today to let you know that the day that I had been forecasting was going to come has come. We're out of money. And our board of directors yesterday directed us to start to somehow say we have no other choice but to curtail service. And operations manager and I are figuring out how we can best do that with minimal impact to the public and to our staff. What you have before you is the letter we have from we received from MDOT that is their budget recommendation. They forecast based upon our budget what federal assistance we'll be receiving, what state assistance we'll be receiving, and then a recommendation on what local support we need. As you know, historically, we have not received local support for transit in the entire history of the transit agency. And in the past, that was okay because we were making enough revenue from county partners, contract partners, that it covered that shortfall. But our mix now has gone from being 75-25 back in 2014 of contract to general public to 45-55 now. And what's the impact of that? Well, from a revenue perspective, our median revenue for vehicle hours for contracts is $42.50, but for the general public, it's only $3.04. So when your general public is going up and your contract's going down, the revenue's going the opposite direction, it's not sustainable. So I've been asked previously to let you know what we were doing. We did have a rainy day fund of about $52,000 that you see listed on the second page there in our 12-month cash flow projection. We have requested disbursement of $50,000 of that $52,000 that was in this premium stabilization fund that was designed to protect us in case we had some claim, some insurance claim, a liability claim that was unfunded, so we could keep our premiums stable and not see a spike in premiums. So we've requested disbursement of that $52,000. Our ask from you tonight, and we can formalize that in the letter if you desire, but we're asking that you match that $50,000 as soon as possible, hopefully in October, to start the fiscal year, and then another in January, another in April. Now, the basis for this request is that it will keep us solvent until we can hear the will of the people in the millage proposal that will be voted on in February, which is a desire that we heard you had expressed previously. So with this, with these disbursements, it will allow us either to be able to have an orderly shutdown if the voters reject our millage request, or to continue operating it through the first quarter of next year. And then we can figure out what to do after that to operate until millage funds start coming in, which will be approximately January 2025. Any questions?
You all still work with the Wajak?
We do. We run the Wajak DART, and they're independently funded, and their service will continue unabated.
Right.
Is helping them run their program cost the transit authority any money?
No.
Completely scot-free.
Right. We've raised our rate significantly. It was $45.20 we were charged then. Now they're paying us $60 an hour per vehicle hour service, minus the time that we spend driving to Dowagiac, the deadhead time. And they also pay us an administrative fee that is about equivalent to what they were paying their person to run the system up there, plus a little overhead.
Wow. Good for the Wajak.
Your millet, or your ballot request, what are you asking for?
We're asking for 0.29 mils
Okay.
over 4 years. A small, very small millage, but that will help us to operate. and it'll also help us to slightly expand service. Right now, we've been maintaining a constant level of service, but there's still needs out there in the community that aren't being met. We received a call yesterday from an unhoused woman we commonly refer to as homeless, who was in a job program trying to get trained so she can get a job and put a roof over her head and her son's head, and we were unable to accommodate her. We have another young person in Howard Township that's in those far reaches over by Barron Lake, on the other side of Barron Lake, that goes to Niles Schools. He's in a wheelchair, and they can't, Niles Schools won't transport him. It's in Niles Dial-A-Ride, it's outside their territory, it's in our territory. But to go out there for $2.75, we're putting ourselves deeper in the hole. So just some examples of some of the needs that we're not meeting currently for citizens of the county. I have more data available for your consideration. Later, breakdowns of how many of your constituents are riding in each of your districts. All kinds of financial information, anything that you need to properly consider this request.
Just to clarify, you mentioned that there was 3 disbursements that you're asking for from the board for, how much was that dollar figure again?
$50,000. It was 4 disbursements of $50,000. Correction, Commissioner Burr, that was 3.
Yeah, you said October, January, and April.
Yes.
That millage you're going for, what's that equate to dollar-wise, about 500,000?
700 and some thousand. And that ballot language has been submitted to the clerk as of July 14th, and she indicated it's in good order, so
That'll be a February vote, right?
Yes, sir.
Not to be paid out till 25.
Right.
Man.
Does anybody else have any other questions for him? How would you guys all like to move forward regarding this request? Do we want to see it formally on paper, and then we can meet at a special meeting or something to discuss it as a group? How do you guys want to move forward?
Can we move it forward right now?
I would like to see the numbers though, as far as like per district, if you could, that shows like how many people use it from each district.
Sure.
When's the first disbursement that you're asking for?
I was asking for it in October.
In October, that's like next month, so, yeah, don't have much time.
Like a week and a half away.
Right.
I didn't say when in October, though, so yeah, plenty of flexibility there.
In October.
Yeah, yeah.
So do we want to see the formal request, and then we can make our progressive movement from the formal request?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, based upon that, is there any particular form that the formal request would need to take? Is a simple letter sufficient?
I would say a simple letter, and then whatever supporting numbers, factors that you can include with it, include everything that you can to support it, and then just forward it to the administrator.
I'll distribute it from there.
Very well. I will put together a packet, a formal request packet, and have it to you before next week's full meeting.
And by, like, what's the cutoff in October? Like, when do you need it by?
End of month, our rainy day fund, we expect that to be disbursed, sometime next week, and so that'll tide us over for a bit. The only reason we were able to make payroll tomorrow is by the grace of the Cass County Council on Aging paying us a week early, their invoice for last month. So it's a very, very tight and desperate situation. And Julie and I are doing our best to analyze the situation and see how we can follow directives of the board to curtail operations, but in the most effective and least invasive and impactful way possible.
All right, if there's no more questions, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Do we have any other county partners present? Don't believe so. Moving on to elected officials, who would like to go first? If anybody has anything?
The name Reese Pence may not be a name you're familiar with, but today down south of the border in Indiana, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. And most people in Cass County will probably never know much about him, but a lot of us in the room do know who that person is. And a lot of times when we as elected officials and the courts, law enforcement and so forth are here, just obviously very vigorously indicating why it is that we feel it's so important to make sure that, that the courts and our offices are funded properly. It's because of things such as this. Reese Pence, in this case, I'd also indicate it as just an example of something I think that you can be proud of with your courts, with your law enforcement, and with your prosecutor's office in regard to their cooperation with law enforcement in our neighboring counties as well as down in Indiana. Reese Pence was an individual who murdered someone down in Indiana because she was cooperating with law enforcement in Michigan on a lot of very serious crimes. And so the response of Reese Pence was to kill her. And again, he was convicted today of 2 counts of first-degree murder. She was not the only one, again, obviously the victim of his efforts and so forth. But as I mentioned, Cass County has been involved in this for many, many months. Our prosecutor's office involvement in this. Mr. Pence has committed crimes here in Cass County as well. He's a juvenile when he did these things, but included car theft and so forth. We presented our case to our local court. And I can't say too much about it because that's actually still pending, but again, our court listened to the evidence that we had regarding Mr. Pence, as well as other persons involved in this activity, and as a result of the evidence presented, was willing to hold individuals involved in this activity in safe locations, again, incarcerated, so that, again, the criminal enterprise that these individuals were involved in would not continue. And it wasn't just a criminal enterprise in regard to stolen property and things like that. It's in regard to violence and death. Some really serious stuff, particularly on the west end of the county, in the Niles and Dowagiac area. Mr. Pence being someone with long ties to the Dowagiac area and so forth. So just wanted to bring that, so often, we're here talking about budget numbers, as I said at the beginning, and these type of things, but it's important to remember that there's a reason why we fund law enforcement and the reason why we fund the courts. It's because of life and death issues. And I can tell you from my 40-year perspective, if this hadn't happened, if this cooperation hadn't occurred, if the agencies hadn't done what needed to be done in a stellar fashion, we'd be seeing more murders from these individuals than what we've seen so far. So again, I just hats off to everybody that was involved in this, and again, appreciate your, understand the importance of funding local government, particularly agencies that are involved in public safety. Thanks.
Thanks.
Sheriff Carroll? No, I'm good. Okay.
I just wanted to, just to emphasize that September's Recovery Month, and so there's a lot of activities going on at Woodlands, and Vice Chair Leyland mentioned the drive-in movie theater thing that's going on Sunday night, and it just made me also think about our opioid funds in our county, and I hope that committee will get started, soon, because there's probably some needs that some of these different partners talk about that requests could be made with respect to those opioid funds, because some of these issues related to a lot of issues people face are related to use of drugs, et cetera. So I'm not saying I understand that'll be determined at a later date, but since we have that money, it's a way to bridge some gaps in services in a lot of different ways. So I think it'll be important to get going on that. Also wanted to report that we had a public satisfaction survey last week in the court, so we'll be finding out what people thought about their services. It was really hard to get people to engage in the public satisfaction survey. When they would enter the building, they would start putting their head down and then walk away because they did not want to fill out the surveys. And then they did them online as well if they had Zoom court. But the feedback that we had received from the online ones, we've already gotten that, and it was fairly favorable. So we'll share that information when we receive it. So I just wanted to report on those couple of things. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff said he's good, so we'll move on. We have no unfinished business.
Yes. Jeff.
Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. I had your name written down, I just completely skipped it.
Evening, board members. I just wanted to quickly touch on the solar siting item you have. Michigan Association of Counties reached out to every drain commissioner in this county earlier this year asking about this, and this is why they're taking this position, is because it was a little bit of an eye-opener for them. I know a couple of years ago, there was a lot of windmills that were sited over in the Thumb area, and I talked to a couple of those drain commissioners. Well, now it's all hands on deck. It's happening everywhere, and so The Michigan Association of County Drain Commissioners is in support of MAC in their endeavor to do this. To, one, respect local control, and number two, respect private property owners.
And farmland.
And the farmland. I was, if you're at I-94 and 69, I don't know the last time you've been through there, but it's going to look vastly different than you're going to remember. I was actually at a meeting there, and I met one of the senior engineers for NextEra Energy, that's the parent company of Florida Light and Power. And I got to talk to him while we were waiting in line for lunch. And basically, I said, why are you interested in Michigan? And he said, well, because we don't want to force our way in. You know, they were accepting here. Well, then later on, a couple months later, I heard the comment made that they were being, set back by 5-member boards, the planning commissions. So, there's always two sides to an issue, but in the end, you have to hang your hat somewhere. And the one thing we have, like this board or that board of trustees, is the local control.
That's right.
And so, anyway, I just wanted to let you know, the drain commissioners were brought into the fold on this. Everyone has filled out a survey on where these are going on, how many proposals there are, et cetera, and they are in support of it.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
You need to go first, then Cal.
Thank you.
All right, I don't believe we have any unfinished business. So moving on to new business. Item A is the appointment of Michael O'Rourke to the Solid Waste Planning Committee as an industry representative to a term ending 6/1 of '25.
Yeah,
We move that forward?
Yeah, we can move that forward.
Yep.
Yeah, we interviewed it.
B would be the Board of Canvassers reappointment.
We move that forward?
Yep.
Everybody's good moving it forward?
Yep.
I'm sure we're all in agreement for Operation Greenlight.
You skipped the
You skip
number
bylaws.
C.
Oh, Board of Commissioner bylaws.
Yeah,
Has everybody had a chance to go through that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions or anything before we push it forward?
Yep, I do.
All right, so you guys want to take a minute and discuss it?
Go ahead. Okay, I have a couple things. I get to it. Okay, sorry, people, they're taking up so much time to get to it. Okay, on page 6, 3.4, order of business for regular meetings, E, public comment. And then on page 7, we have a second public comment, that's Q. So we have 2 public comments, and I would like to suggest that our public comment, the first public comment be limited to agenda items,
Like it used to be.
like it used to be.
Yeah.
And then the second public comment, Q, that could be, as an example, last meeting, we had a young man from Penn Township, and he wanted to talk about the odor from the marijuana. That's the type of thing that works for that second public comment. First public comment, like you said, the green light. If someone wanted to talk about the green light, that worked for veterans.
Yeah.
So those are 2 examples of
Yeah, agenda item only.
agenda item,
I
and then
agree.
anything you feel the need to talk
I
about.
agree with that, because we get a lot of other stuff in the beginning.
Who has the next thing for the rules of procedure?
We got one.
Oh,
Or-
I
unless
have
she's
something
next.
else.
don't think she was done.
You weren't done?
No.
Yeah, Mary's next after that.
I wasn't finished, but
Oh.
go ahead, okay. And I am sorry, I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'm not advocating this, but there is no mention that the meetings are recorded. I just wondered if that should be part of our rules of procedure, that the meetings are recorded, or?
I would like that, because we record them now. We got them on YouTube,
Yeah.
and yeah, I would like to see that.
That's probably, I think, under like 3.8. for record of discussion, we could probably add a quick item that, meetings of the Board of Commissioners will be recorded and live streamed.
Yeah, keep the same,
Like maybe be very general about it.
the
just
same
so that-
platform that we got,
Yeah.
cause that works out.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
Commissioner Howard, are you got more?
no, I'm finished.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. As per your email this morning, you had stated that this information, we had already gone through it through our packet, and I did review it when I first got in, being a new commissioner. And then you said you would provide us with this copy, which you did tonight. But you also made the comment that what is in our packet is new, and there was not enough time to redline. So there really wasn't that much time to do a comparison. So what I'm proposing, if we could do a workshop for rules of procedure, and we could go through every item in case there is questions. You know, there may be things in here that's in the new one that's like, wait a minute, maybe we want to change that. So that all of us could be in the same room, we could take line by line, we could discuss them, and then we can really finalize it. It'll be a solid document.
Sounds good to me. We can add other stuff to that workshop.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just doing a quick comparison between what we had and what's being proposed. There's at least 5, 6 different changes, probably more. I think it's worth looking at this in further detail and just kind of reviewing those bylaws step by step.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, I think when you look at it, part of it is that, you know, it in a lot of cases in the past, and these have been for many years, is it was kind of taking it and then starting from what we had before and redlining that and making changes. What we kind of approached it with from this, the new bylaws was really not even starting from here, something brand new and saying, okay, now we did incorporate elements from our existing rules of procedure into it, but I think where the red line challenges come in is that, you know, it's organized differently. So when you look at our existing rules, for example, the
Yeah,
organizational
it
meeting, it's there, but it's actually in a later
Yeah.
section, and then some of those
Yeah.
things are broken up into like other different sections, so it was kind of not really apples to apples in that regard. But I think, yeah, I mean, I guess the way I would look at it is, these are the rules that the board is saying we're gonna follow, and so it makes perfect sense for the board to say, you know what, if we're gonna make a big sweeping change, let's really go through it and make sure that we're all on board and wanna do that. I think that's fantastic.
So I will save mine until the workshop.
So we'll look forward to communications on the workshop. You still have something to
No, that sounded good to me. Workshop.
All right, so we'll be scheduling a workshop for that item. Everybody's good with that?
Yep.
All right, item D is Operation Greenlight.
We could move that forward.
Okay. Item E is discussion on a budget committee.
So I asked to have that on there, more just so that we can stay on top of it more, like, that way, I don't know, I guess it's more just, what do you guys think as far as how the budget was handled? I think that there needs to be some kind of way where we're officially getting together and talking about that. I mean, that's the way we exist, is to handle the money for the county, you know, so I would think like a budget committee would be a good idea, maybe meet every other month, just to kind of make sure that things kind of look like they're progressing correctly, or just so we can make sure that we are being more effective with how we handle the budget.
Could we go a step above committee and just host a few special meetings throughout the year and everybody can sit and talk about it?
That would be perfect. That would be actually what I would prefer, if we can all just get together bi-monthly.
Or
Quarterly.
do a couple workshops?
I'd like to see something quarterly.
Quarterly?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Sounds
think
good to me.
quarterly's gonna be enough for
I don't
related items.
You don't think quarterly is enough? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I've said this before, I'm not really in favor of a budget committee necessarily, because I do think that this is the responsibility of everyone on this board and not just a couple of members. That being said, I know Jen's not here to speak for herself, but I did have a conversation with her today, And I asked her if there was any way that we could possibly look at the finance report, because that was a report that she took over from the predecessor and she continued it forward. But she was open to the idea of revamping the finance report. And I asked the question to the board, is it something that we can look at and entertain that would maybe fulfill some of the questions that we have revolving around the budget versus doing meetings? But it's just a question to be, to discuss.
We did a special meeting for the budget, that, we could add that grant stuff in there too, couldn't we? Wouldn't that be a good time to do it, getting money, talking about money?
I mean, it's worth entertaining the idea of revamping the report to maybe look at something new.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think with looking at it, whether it's workshops, things like that, I mean, I think the one thing we have to look at is, kind of establishing, like, what is the goal? Is the goal looking at existing budget for the current year? Is it looking ahead? What does that timeline look like? What is the, so I think that's just, I guess what I would recommend is that if we're gonna look at scheduling a series of workshop meetings or whatever it is, it would be best to have a clearly articulated, like, what are the purposes of these and what are our goals, and then make sure that, our department heads, our elected officials specifically are aware of, what we're, what the goal of those meetings are. Yeah, I mean, an important agenda.
Yeah.
It
would depend on, I guess, what you're looking at.
There would be meetings talking about the future fiscal year budget, correct?
I mean, I would say, I would prefer it to be that way, where we can say, look, this is what needs to kind of be done, where we're planning out and looking into the next budget, so we're not just blindly cutting a position that we don't actually, like, that way we know, like, I would like the elected officials to be involved, of course, so that way they can make their recommendations too, but there's more of an open line of communication between us together as a group, because we can meet formally and discuss it, and the elected officials, so that they can give us their input, and we're not just the month before we have to have a decision, blindly shooting in the dark and cutting things.
Our clerk, yeah, I think she needs to get caught up.
I actually had just I wanted to just say, like, next year being a crazy year for our office in particular, we don't wanna like add a ton of meetings to, if you're talking about having you as a quorum, as all of you here, like, just
Somebody
be
has to be
mindful
here.
of that
Yeah.
too, that, like, we, and everybody's busy, I get that, but it is going to be extremely busy
Yeah, it is.
next year for
It
us,
is.
Do we
so,
keep minutes for workshops?
yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
anytime.
Well, there's gotta be a way we can meet that we don't keep minutes if we're not discussing business or making decisions.
Oh, Carol?
Go ahead, Jim.
Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just wondered if maybe, and I'm certainly not, I know Sheriff's been here longer than me even, but also an idea might be that some of us that have been around could submit some ideas to Matt for your all consideration about how we could have like a little bit better timeline laid out, because it feels like we're constantly reinventing the wheel of how we're doing budgets. And I'm not saying that you can't adapt and change every year, but it would just be helpful for me at least, and I know for some of the other electeds, like it's September.
Makes
I'm
sense.
thinking about, like all the hearings that I've got in the spring, and then I'm thinking about, like, we're planning on a long-term basis, and so it always stresses me out when I hear about, well, there's gonna be that meeting and this meeting and this meeting and that meeting, because then it's my obligation to be here, which I'm not saying I'm not willing to be, but it becomes like, we need to know what meetings is it absolutely necessary for us to be here, and what are the topics of discussion. And we've had in years past some very streamlined details about this is what you need to submit, and this is when we'll meet, and this is when we'll discuss it. Instead of kind of every time we come to a meeting, we decide, oh, we're gonna need to meet again, and then we're gonna need to meet again, and we're gonna need to meet again. It was much clearer, like the plan. So, and again, I'm not saying my ideas are right, Sheriff might have ideas, there's others in this room that might have ideas, but maybe somebody could sift through some of those ideas so that then you could have a game plan.
If we're in agreement of meeting as a workshop for the bylaws, can we maybe just bring this into the discussion and we can bring forth their ideas and share anyone that wants to have input on what the right direction is going forward?
Yeah, I think it'd be fun for you
Great
guys to do
idea.
that, that'd be great.
We could we could make the budget an item in the cow for future meetings too. And it
Yeah.
wouldn't incur another meeting, because we
Yeah.
could discuss it here for a 20-minute allotment. every month leading up to needing the budget
Right.
finalized.
Which would be awesome too, because it's just one of those things where, like, it's always on people's minds, and then when we don't really know the direction that things are going in, it creates a lot of unnecessary stress, in my opinion, when we could have kind of had a game plan all along. I understand that at the end, you might have to then hold some special meetings, et cetera, and that's your prerogative, but, a good plan is really helpful. So especially when, taking into account elections and all the other things that all of you do. I mean, it's like hard to get together, so.
Yeah, the only thing to keep in mind is that I think there are just a quick note that there's only so many things that we're gonna know in advance. I mean, so in some cases, like whether it's revenue sharing, or, I mean, a good example is where there's percentages where the state may be changing the funding of certain programs, but we may not know that a year in advance. I mean, that may come up 6 months beforehand or 5 months beforehand. I mean, there are just certain things where we wouldn't get the guidance on it until much later. I mean, that's not to say that you couldn't discuss like overarching goals of what we want to achieve, but just keep in mind some of the specifics, we may not have the numbers. I mean, especially when we start looking at things like health insurance, those sorts of, bigger costs we see from an employee benefit standpoint, we aren't gonna have those a year ahead of time. We can maybe come up with rough projections, but we really don't know. I mean, is it gonna be a 5% increase? Is it gonna be 2? Is it gonna be 8? I mean, I really can't tell you right now what next year's rates are gonna be. I just can't. And then I
But some
think,
things as they come up, then we can
Sure.
educate ourselves at the cow meetings.
oh, and I think like goal-wise, I think it would be good to articulate, like, if there's a broad focus, what is it? I mean, so it's like, if the goal is like, we want to get to where there's no fund balance allocation in the budget, well, then I think knowing that that's the end goal would be big. I mean, so we can offer up ideas, but having some semblance of like, what is the target we're shooting for would be really helpful for us to try to be able to figure out how do we get to that as well.
So I'm gonna say that I like that we could talk about it at the workshop to kind of finalize it, get some information, but I do like also doing it at the cow.
Yeah.
Having that be a section that we specifically cover at the cow.
Yeah.
Post it on the next workshop and everybody bring your ideas.
Yeah.
All right, so we got that one figured out, so I'll just write the workshop next to it. Yeah, we can have a 5-minute recess. We're gonna break for 5 minutes and come back at 7:06.
So, definitely
Item
agree.
F is congressionally directed spending / USDA grant historical courthouse.
Want me to talk on that?
I mean, you can.
Yes. So, in kind of relation to some of the previous discussions we've had regarding grants and wanting to have something at a committee of the whole before it might come to the board of commissioners, we know that this is probably going to move quick, much like we talked about. It's been a long process to get to this point, but more than likely, once we get the, okay, here's the documents to sign, it's probably going to be, we'll get this back to us in, 3 weeks or something, so. We wanted to at least get it on here to let everybody know that we've talked about it for quite some time now, but we do anticipate the congressionally directed spending, grant agreement itself to come in. We're reviewing it to make sure, what approvals do we need, but my guess is it may be coming to the board, and it may not be something where it could potentially be time sensitive, and that we may not be able to have it go to the next committee of the whole and then wait till November. I mean, it may need to move faster than that, so I don't know if it'll be a special meeting, or depending on when we get it, if that could be something that would appear at the, the next regular meeting, but just wanted to give a heads up that is coming.
So I think that's good enough right there, the notice, and then anybody has any questions, they can come to you and get an update or status report, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we would have a meeting for this
Yeah.
grant then? Okay.
Yeah.
Could one of the items be on the grant to return the money to the sheriff?
I don't know how, that's not exactly like, I guess, the purpose of this, but I think that's been.
We can make that a topic of discussion at the next COW.
Okay, because it was obligated and designated and then taken away for the courthouse, and I think it would be only fair if it was given back to him.
Or, we have a discussion on the timeline, like we did a timeline for something. That way, we can do the timeline from the beginning of that, all the way like we did with the MERS thing. And then we can see what would have happened. Is that what you're asking?
Well, and I think the focus
No.
was in the projects the sheriff was looking to do. I mean, I would note that those were included, at least the major priority items were included in the budget for the next year under public improvement, which is what would have been the funding source for the courthouse if there was not a congressionally directed spending grant. So I mean, I think it's kind of implicit in that by having those things in the budget for the sheriff's department in that regard, then it's actually happening as budgeted anyway. So I mean, I really don't think
I
there's
guess you'll have to show that.
Huh?
You'll have to show that.
Yeah.
So everybody's good that we're gonna have
Show
something
what he's talking about.
coming
So
forward
everybody can
to
understand.
finalize the agreement with USDA for that 1.5 million.
Yeah, because this is the one with the old boy, yeah.
So we'll just go with
Move
as
forward.
called for when it's called
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're working with USDA and getting that squared away once we know what the timeline is in the process, and assuming it has to come to the board of commissioners, we'll coordinate that with the chair and vice chair and make sure we have it squared away.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I just have one thing I would like to add to Administrator Newton, is that in end of November, we sent 581 pages to the USDA, and there were 4 of us who worked on that. That, and then we got this. This is a whole bunch more things we have to do.
That's from the
So-
Gary Peters, right?
Yes.
That's the name I'm trying to remember.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it was a whole lot of work, and it's been a whole lot of work ever since. Just as an example, and because it's a federal grant, so.
You jump through a lot of hoops, that's
You do.
that's for sure.
You do.
Item G, go ahead. You have a question?
So I guess when we discuss it, we'll be able to be provided more details on how exactly the $1.5 million grant will be utilized in conjunction with the county's existing funding for the historic
Absolutely,
renovation.
absolutely.
And then on top of that, just give an overview on how the project management oversight for the grant is approved. Yeah, I guess those are the 2 things.
Probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to add a short snippet in the next workshop for grant or historic courthouse overview, project overview. just to bring everybody else up to speed, so everybody's at the same level. Next item is intra-agency facilities agreement.
That's too easy.
So can we move that forward?
Yeah, that's too easy.
No, I think we're gonna move that forward unless somebody's got any serious questions.
I got some numbers for you.
Oh, okay, sure.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Sam, go ahead with your question.
Take longer.
Sam has a question.
Could you elaborate on the financial impact on the agreement, particularly the $15 per hour increase and the IRS mileage rate charges for the mileage outside of Cass County? Thank you.
Say that again?
Could you elaborate on the financial impact of the agreement, particularly the $15 per hour increase and the IRS mileage rate charges for the mileage outside of Cass County?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I can give you a background of where that came from. So the original agreement was for, I think, $90 per hour. We looked at, I think, the cost that we have for Dave, as well as fringe benefits, things like that. So obviously, we've had some changes with MERS in the last year. Obviously, you have like cost of living adjustments, things like that. So we took that into account. And then part of it with mileage, I think, is when we first established this agreement, we really, that was kind of one thing that maybe we hadn't necessarily considered was, I think the logic was, well, most of the partner agencies are fairly close. It's not like we're driving long distances, but I think in working with Dave on these things, we found that, what happens in some cases is there's an emergency. And so whether it's, COA or somebody else says, oh my gosh, we've got this problem, and it's not like, well, we're gonna order a part and when it gets here in 3 days, we'll come and put it in. It's, hey, we need to get this fixed now. Well, in those cases, it necessitates a trip to, a supplier in some cases. So a lot of times that's leaving the county, so you're talking about, driving to Kalamazoo or South Bend or something like that, and that's additional, mileage that we're putting on the van, that's the gas that we're driving to do that as well. And so it was like, well, in this case, I think what we needed to look at was trying to find some sort of a way to offset the additional wear and tear we're gonna see in vehicles in those cases where we have to take, extra travel to get something specific to, one of our partners in that regard. I can't necessarily specify the exact, financial implications. I mean, I think a lot of it really depends on usage. And so since there isn't necessarily a flat, we're paying this amount per month, it's really more based on usage. It really depends on, kind of what happens there. I mean, we may have some months where, we get calls from one of the agencies, every other day, and we're out there a lot. Or we may have a month where things are going pretty good and we haven't had a call for a week. I mean, I don't know exactly the call frequency.
Yeah, well,
you might have a better idea.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. That is just for, my name's Dave Reeve. I'm your facilities director. And that is just for those three entities, the savings that are realized there. So that doesn't take into account the savings that we're realizing for our buildings. And for every one call that we get for those three entities, we're getting 3 or 4 for our buildings. So, I've never run all the numbers for our buildings. This was just for the interagency agreement. I've kept track of all that. If those of you that don't know me, I haven't met all of you yet personally, but I'm a 32-year member of Local 357, plumbers, pipe fitters, HVAC, refrigeration. And about a year and a half ago, I got a call from one of my customers, Cass County, who I'd worked down here for 26 years as your, mechanical contractor. Dave Dickey, your old director, called me, said he was going to retire, wanted to know if I was interested in the position. So I said, yeah, I'll come down and talk to you about it, and did so. And then I got to learn the vision that they had of actually incorporating other entities in the county, providing these savings not only for our buildings, but throughout, as we've done. And I thought, all those years of running service, you get a lot of time in the van, and you get frustrated listening to talk radio and think of all the waste that's going on in government, and I thought, this is a way I could make a difference, and because you always are frustrated. I can vote, what else can I do? So I thought this would be a great way for me. I loved what I was doing, but I could get involved
and make a difference. And in a year and a half time, year and 5 months, we have. It's been great. And we've got a good trained department now. We've got young guys, 2 young guys, and an older gentleman that's been here for 23 years now. But these guys they came in not knowing anything. Now they're doing electrical, they're doing plumbing, light HVAC. They just are sponges. They love it. And I can send them on any call in the county now. They do not go to the other entities. I'm the only one that goes there. They're not licensed. But the great thing is we have great partnerships now with those other entities. It's been wonderful. Road Commission, not only are we providing great savings to them, but anytime we need something equipment-wise that they have that we don't have to go rent it. I call Bob or Greg, yeah, come get it. Take it for as long as you need it, scissor lifts, any equipment we need. So they've been great. But we just have a great working relationship. When I'm over at the medical center, they've got 3 techs, and I've worked with them. I've taught them how to solder and some electrical, and some of the refrigeration that I work on over there, they're always there wanting to learn. So the savings are huge, and I'm excited about it. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question here on this contractor pricing, is that estimates that you've actually gotten from contractors?
No, what I did was, had I been called to that call as your contractor, as I was always coming down here, that's how I would have priced it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I mean.
Every invoice, yeah. So we're not paying markup on any parts now throughout the county or the other entities. I've got accounts still at all the vendors, the wholesale houses. So we don't pay markup anymore from contractor, unless we absolutely have to hire a contractor to come in, then obviously we pay their prices. But, I don't think contractors are bad, but if all the money we can save here and keep in the county, that's my goal. So yeah, that's how I priced all of that, yeah. Because you got your truck charge, you mark up on parts, and, they charge a fuel surcharge now, yeah, so. Anybody
I
else?
hear a lot being said about savings, and believe me, I appreciate the work that you're doing
Sure.
for the county. I just want to know if there's a plan for the ongoing performance evaluation and monitoring of this service to ensure that quality and there's cost effectiveness here.
Well, as it was in the private sector, your customers do that for you. These guys, they won't keep calling me back if the quality isn't there. I've had 0 callbacks. I'm proud of that. We got 101 calls, and every one of them, they're happy. And we had a meeting a week and a half ago, interagency facility meeting, and they all came and rave reviews. So, and they all want to sign back on, and now Woodlands would like to as well. We did a project for Woodlands, approved by Matt, and it went really well, and they would like to sign on too.
You mentioned a minute ago about training. Is that a cost that the county's incurring? Are you training these individuals yourself?
Yeah, so there's no cost. Yeah, so, and I love to do it. In the private sector, I brought up, in my 32 years, I brought up 3 apprentices, and they're full journeymen now. So I had, good experience working with them, and our training program, through the local, I grew up in the trade, but then when I got into the local at 19, 5 years apprenticeship was just phenomenal, great training on the job, but you're also at class once a week too. So it was great, and I love to pass that on, and I love working with these young guys. It's really cool when they start to feel confident and feel like they can accomplish some things on their own.
Great job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's, it was a vision that the Board of Commissioners had, so, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like
As long
to
as you
add
have me.
too, and I know Dave heard this as well. We've obviously interacted with Senator Peters' office a couple times since we've been working through the congressionally directed spending stuff. And we asked him about this when he came down to visit us one time and said, you know of any other counties doing anything like this? And they kind of said, no, that's really unique. And they were really interested in it. We talked to them about it a couple times, and they kind of told us that, hey, you guys are really creating a new model that it doesn't really exist anywhere else, and that's really kind of exciting. And I think that's really cool. I mean, I think we're really passionate about that. I think it's fun that I haven't done it yet, but at some point as we get all of these agreements underway and we're really in a good place, to put an article together to get in front of MAC to say, look, when we work together with our partners and work on building relationships and finding ways to save money, look at what's possible, you know, and I think that hopefully this will be a great example for other counties to be able to contact us and say, hey, how did you guys do that? And it'd be fun for us to be kind of being the trailblazers.
It is.
on something
Yeah. When I got that call, from Dave Dickey, I ran commercial industrial services, so I was over in Detroit when I got the call. And there are many guys just like myself that after that many years, you're tired of running that rat race and would entertain something like this in their county, you know.
So if you
it
got to
became-
train any of them guys, Dave, charge them.
Hey, good idea, yeah. But, you know, most of those guys are gonna be skilled already, they're
Right.
coming out of the field. and
Right.
I think it's a great idea if it could grow, you know, around the state, save these counties some money.
Any other questions for him? All right, we'll move forward to the next meeting.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep, thank you guys.
Item H, intra-agency marketing agreement.
Yeah, so I talked about this quite a bit, I guess, in my, during my report too.
You
but,
did.
This is fashioned very much in the same vein as the facilities agreement. You know, specifically, the medical care facility is seeking assistance with branding and marketing, press releases, media relations. And the website, social media component is a big thing for them. You know, like I said, they looked at their existing agreement, and I guess I don't want to hear too much of kind of their side of things, but they had some significant concerns with the cost they were paying for their existing service and what they were getting for it. And they actually approached us and said, hey, you know, we'd like to talk to you guys about being able to do something like this. And so we kind of sat down and thought about, okay, what could we realistically offer? How could we do that? So that's, of course, Exhibit A that's attached there. And in this example, and I think the IT example is gonna be a very similar route, was looking at setting a preset cost and saying, okay, fine, we're gonna offer this service, but this is what it's gonna be per month in that case. So that we're not necessarily doing everything billed by the hour. And I thought this was a better model for something like this. And then if it exceeds a certain number of hours, there's an hourly cost with that. But the IT agreement that we ultimately settle on will be a very similar one to this as well too. But I've worked with our marketing and communications manager to make sure she felt comfortable with the content here. We've talked with the medical care facility about what we'd be providing and, you know, making sure they understood that obviously our obligations are to the county first, but we do think that there is a capacity to be able to fit this in and assist them, especially when we take into account the extra revenues it's bringing in. So I think it's a good deal all around.
Should we move this forward?
So are they paying us the 24,000?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This is additional duties that would be put on marketing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are you talking about an increase or just merging this into her job description?
There'd be no increase in wages. This would just be an increase in revenues for the county.
Okay.
Dave's got something on the lip, go ahead.
Just real quick, Matt, that was a good point. Just so you know, if my morning starts with 5 calls, our buildings take priority. So our buildings are taken care of first, and then we go to the other entities.
Thanks. So everybody's good with moving that one forward to the next meeting? All right, item H is,
Nope, we're on J. Or I, we're on I.
That's what I meant. I
Yeah.
said, I looked at H and said, or looked at I and said-
I'm confused too.
It's been forever
this-
here already tonight.
It's been a long day.
Remunerate.
Monumentation.
Monumentation contract, sorry.
Is
This
this
is-
pretty straightforward?
Yeah, it's
We could-
required by the state, we have to do it every year, and it just looks
It's
like
just
there's a
a
small
change.
revision because one of our surveyors
Yes.
switched firms.
Yep, and so, yeah, the contract was specified for that previous firm. We worked with the state, they said it's fine, you know, the work hasn't been billed yet, just change the name of the firm to his new firm and you're all set. So it doesn't change anything, you know, it's just putting, or anything of substance, it's just correcting the name of the firm.
Moving forward,
Yep.
J, solar and wind sighting.
Mr. Chairman, that's that resolution, and I just have one thing I'd like to say, and that is, I would like to have this sent to the governor, our representative, well, depending on where you live,
Carr.
our representatives, Mr. Carr,
Representatives.
Mr. Paquette,
Yeah.
and definitely Jonathan Lindsay, because they need to know this is how we feel about it.
Yeah, I can add that language that, for the next meeting, that be it further resolved, have this distributed to
Yes,
our state representatives,
Yeah,
Speaker of the House,
Yeah.
Speaker, you know, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Well, I can add that in, that's not a problem.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that one? All right, we'll move it forward. Okay, Sheriff's Department wages.
That was yours, Jim.
Be required to come up or not? Someone's gonna come up.
Oh, yeah, please do.
First, I'd like to thank the chair for making the comment about increasing wages for ambulance for retention and recruitment, because that's what this is all about.
Sure it is.
Recruitment and retention for the road patrol deputies in my office. My letter that I wrote to you was talked about how I've had several people leave over the last few years because of the low amount of pay, the pension change, and other things. And then I've also made a point that we are the second lowest paid law enforcement agency in the county as far as road patrol. So one question I had from a commissioner was, well, if the contracts are closed, how do we do this? And I said, well, you can open a contract at any time, and both parties do. The contract does not expire until December 31st, 2025, so that would pretty much table any discussion on this if you couldn't. So I'm suggesting that we try to open that up if there's interest to do so. One of the things I didn't mention in my letter is the fact that Van Buren County's deputies top out at $33 an hour. And St. Joe County's deputies top out at $32 an hour, and I just lost one to St. Joe County just for that fact alone. I was, in my letter, I just mentioned that maybe we need to get a salary committee or something. That was one of the things one of the commissioners brought up as a possibility, because there's many different ways you can address this. It can be just straight percentages, it can be a signing bonus, it can be an equipment allowance. There's a lot of different ways to do it. That's probably better done in a smaller committee if there's interest to do so. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I think we have to.
Yeah,
I
We have
still bring
to-
forth the recommendation of having the salary committee meeting, but it doesn't appear that that was something that was in our scope of
Well,
responsibilities.
that is, what he's saying is different, like forming a new salary committee to, or just
We have an
for you.
existing salary
Specifically
committee.
for the sheriff's
Do it, I
department.
just think we need
Yeah,
Should just,
but
I
I
would
mean,
just have
that
that go
other
to the
salary
salary
committee is something
committee.
different.
And you probably could just, you know, I mean, if you wanted to expand the scope of what the salary committee does, I mean, I guess that could be on the table.
Well, whatever, we need to do something.
So is everybody in agreement to send this to the new tasked salary committee?
So we're gonna have two salary committees?
No, he said expand the scope, I think,
Expand the
that would
scope.
work. That would
Just
sure work.
expand the
I would
current
support
salary
that.
committee and have it sent to that.
So then this wouldn't need to go to our business meeting, and
No,
we
I'd
just,
go to committee,
to the
then it'd come back to
committee.
committee, or I'd go to the committee, then it'd come to committee of the whole, then to the business meeting.
Got it.
Who,
If it goes
who,
anywhere.
who's on our salary committee?
I say
I
right.
don't say
I
that.
think it's
Sam,
me,
Mary.
Sam, and Mary.
The three of you?
Yes, me, Sam, and Mary.
Okay. Yeah,
All right.
Victor's got his hand up.
I certainly support this for the sheriff, but I also want to make it clear, this has to be for all agencies that are involved in law enforcement. I've been asking for this for 2 years. And if it's, and I've got the same problem that the sheriff does, not being able to hire people and so forth, so it's gonna be open for the sheriff, which I support. It also needs to be done for the prosecutor's office too. I presented this, and, you know, I've got some very compelling numbers, just like the sheriff does.
Next item. Discussion MIDC/grants.
I'd like an answer to the question. Is there any comment on that?
It seemed more like a statement than a question.
No, it's a question.
Okay,
It's a
well,
request.
it didn't sound like a question.
Well, let me clarify that it's a request.
I would send your request to the salary committee for them to look at it. If that's going to the salary committee, then send your request to them, and then they can talk about it formally. And
Why is
move
it being
whenever-
done differently for the sheriff than it is for
The-
me?
His is going to the salary committee too.
Okay, if that's what you've done for that, then.
Yeah, we just said that it's going to the salary committee to be discussed at a lower level in the committee.
Fair enough.
Hang on, Leslie. Sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I think there were questions asked specifically about law enforcement, and so this was a law enforcement situation, of course. You know, I'm always advocating for all employees' wages to be looked at, but I just hope that as we move forward with these discussions, if it can be clearly designated what the BOC is saying, because otherwise then we have to answer the question of, well, what is it that the salary committee is looking at and what's the process, so that we know what to tell our people. Because I read the sheriff's letter and I support him, and my employees may not thank me for this, but I do believe it's different when you're law enforcement out on the road and put yourself in harm's way, or you're out doing an ambulance, et cetera, than it is being in an office job. I'm not saying both are not valuable, and I'm not saying I don't appreciate my people, but they are different professions, so I just hope that the communication is clear about those topics, but, I guess my viewpoint is different. Like, we all have different backgrounds and trajectories, and the sheriff has that. Law enforcement is partially Victor, but doing our office jobs are different than his first responders, the sheriff, and I fully support him in his request to try to make sure that we have the law enforcement we need, because my neighbors are concerned when they read things going on about us not being able to hire deputies, because they want to know when they call 911 what's going to happen.
That somebody will
And
come.
so I realize I only have a few neighbors that tell me these things, but I believe that's general perceptions.
Which communication did you want, Carol?
Just about because what's gonna happen is, and I say this having been here now for a long enough time that I've got the history, is it's then we're all racing to try to get raises for people. And so what is the direction of this? Maybe one needs to be worked on one at a time. We made a request back when we wrote a letter that wasn't very well received earlier this year about that we did want to take a look at compensation countywide. So maybe that could be discussed at a COW at some future date to talk about how are we gonna do that in an organized fashion. Because we don't wanna compete with one another. I want people to be paid fairly across the board and to feel that way. I want our employees to feel valued, all of our employees.
Got it.
But this is a need, and I support the sheriff in filling that need, because public safety is huge, and I know we all have a part in it, Victor and I too, but we can only take care of one thing at a time.
Right.
We set ourselves up for failure, I feel like, a lot of times, because we're trying to do everything. So if there could just be some direction on, maybe it would go on a future COW agenda of how will we handle compensation across the board for other people that are non-law enforcement moving forward.
Roseanne, did you have something?
Yes, this is for the salary committee. When you do your meeting or set up your time for your meeting, please include the finance director as well as the administrator, because they're the ones that know, they know where they can get the money, where we can they absolutely need to be included.
I think they were at that last meeting. So when we talk about expanding the scope of the responsibilities of the salary committee, is this like an official thing that needs to be documented, or what exactly?
Salary committee was generally formed to take care of salary positions.
Salary positions, okay.
Right.
Not hourly paid positions.
Yeah, right. So
you could rename the salary committee if you want to do it formally and just say the pay committee or the whatever generic name you want to give it. Or you could just leave a salary committee with some different responsibilities.
So I guess when I asked the question to Matt about whether or not we can do something about it, it seemed like he had a list of like what we can do and what we can't do. So does that list need to be updated, or are we saying that now?
If we all get together now and say that it can change, then it can change. But we can do that after we all talk about it as a group. Go ahead, Matt.
I believe there is a resolution that established the salary committee, because most standing
There is.
committees will have a resolution of that nature.
There is.
And then it would spell out what the duties of that committee are.
So we have to look it up and amend it.
So that would be, we could pull that back up, and then, if there's duties that need to be added, that could be done. And the two things I guess I wanted to say, and I think probably the elected officials would echo these as well. If I'm wrong, of course, speak up. But in my time here, I think the way that we go about requesting a new position or requesting a change in pay has changed like 5 times. And it's been very convoluted and difficult. I mean, I would suggest, whether it's the committee of the whole, the board as a whole determining this, maybe it's a workshop, maybe this is another workshop sort of item, but articulating, for me as well as for elected officials, if there are these requests, how do we approach it? Because I think it's been confusing for me also, let alone I think our elected officials too, and that makes it really difficult when it's like, well, Matt, I have this, how do I go about it? And I'm like, well, we used to do this, but then we moved to that, and then we moved to this, and now we do it this way. It becomes really confusing, and I know like, about 2 weeks after I became the administrator, we had to have an item that came through and redo, or make kind of reaffirm decisions on the part of the board for decisions that were made at the salary committee previously. So I mean, it's something where I think it's important that we articulate what is the process so everybody knows what it is, and it's clearly, it's clearly laid out. The other thing I guess I would just mention too is that there is an interplay, of course, between pay and benefits and the budget. So, I mean, I think it is important that, you have to look at both of those things together and say, okay, well, if we're gonna have this happen and we're gonna adjust wages here, what's the implication for the budget? How do we control that, or what can we do to make sure we're accommodating that in the future budget? And so there is that element to consider also.
Okay, so we're moving item K to the salary committee. Everybody's in agreement on that?
Yes.
So are we updating the resolution?
Yeah, we can, but we can't do that right now. We'd have to bring it to the full board meeting and do it.
Yeah,
If everybody's fine with that, we can find the resolution, put it on the next board meeting to make the amendment,
Yeah.
change it.
So we can meet as a salary committee to address the concern before we update that resolution.
I doubt you're gonna get a meeting scheduled before we have our next board meeting.
Because our next board meeting is the first week of October.
Okay. Oh, gotcha.
October 5th.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
So I would
quick.
push scheduling that meeting until after we have our board meeting.
Yeah.
Carol, go ahead.
I was just gonna make the suggestion, I know it was called salary committee before, but all these things stem around compensation, so maybe that'll be something that you could look at, because that's what all of our requests had to do with was compensation.
There's another name, wages and benefits, that we can change it to, and maybe roll that committee that we started into that also, because it all pay and benefits and all that, all the same. Yeah,
We need to keep separation between those.
separate between that, all right. Yeah, but wages and
Conversation makes
benefits,
sense to me.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
moving on to the last item, so we can get through this. Discussion MIDC/grants.
I'm done.
You didn't want,
I'm done.
yeah,
Carol answered everything.
Yes, she did.
yeah.
Everybody's
So,
good moving forward?
no, we don't need to move it at all, because we already,
It's just a discussion.
Whatever appeases everybody else, I'm happy with.
yeah, don't
Do you
need
have
to
any
move.
board member comments and or announcements?
I move that we adjourn.
Whoa, yes.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Jim, you are awesome, man.
Yes, Kate.